that I'm like 20 minutes into a good conversation, and then I'm like, oh, I ought to be recording this. Uh, so in light of recording this, welcome all to the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. Let me check if everything goes well, if everything goes as planned, if we're actually live on the platforms that I want to be live at. Seems we're live at YouTube, which is the most important one, of course, because that's where most of my viewers are, most of my subscribers are. So, yeah, welcome everyone. I have today with me two very interesting guests. Both have been on the podcast before. It's just that the one with Matt has yet to air. It should be scheduled. Have I scheduled it yet? No, I haven't. So that is coming up, and of course, the Mr. Blackwall. If you are a fan of the channel, you know about from the Arthurian Legends show and the one we did about dragons. Both like 2.5+ hours long, I believe. I believe one of them we went even into the 3 hours.
I think that might have been the Dragons one, because I think I probably surprised you.
Yeah, I believe so. And then with Matt, the show that we recorded last Wednesday, actually, like we went also like 2 hours 45, 2 hours 50, like closing in on like 3 hours. So with three chatterboxes and three very knowledgeable guys here. Um, I mean, introduce yourself, I guess. Well, Matt, like you go first. You're the one who is still relatively unknown to the channel.
Sure. Thanks, first of all, Stein, for the invite. Thanks, Blackwall, for inviting me as well, since I guess the podcast will be first with you. And thanks, Jin, for the bridge between me and Stein. So I'm Matt Mora. You can find me on X, like the name suggests. I'm a Kabbalist, meaning I study Kabbalah. Not the Jewish Kabbalah, not the Hermetic Kabbalah, not the Egyptian Kabbalah. It's what I call, and what my lineage calls, the primordial Kabbalah. So all the different systems, and Kabbalah is a name to encompass it. So the main idea is the study of the technology of the soul. So we try to study our body, our surroundings, and with that we understand all the other things, and we make the bridges between them. So to put it short, that will be it. If you want to know more about it, then you can then listen to the podcast Stein will release.
Awesome.
Then I guess Blackwall.
Yeah,
Sure.
Mr. Blackwall.
So my name's Todd. I am a Christian, and I obviously I'm here because we're talking about some things regarding Hebrew translation, the veracity of the Bible as a historical document, and also as the Word of God. Now, obviously, I believe it's the Word of God, and these gentlemen do not. So it'll be an interesting discussion. Stein's like, well, kind of. I see you, but. But also, I am a published author. I just released my second book last month, so you can check that out on our website, blackwallgames.com. Should you be interested in role-playing games and medieval fantasy?
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for the introduction. And this is the show, so good night. No. Of course not. No. The way this whole podcast actually came to be is because of that stupid text wall email that I got on the Greyhorn Pagans email telling me, how bad I am and how much I will burn in hell and all of that good stuff. Very loving and teaching, and definitely makes me want to follow the true God, because oh dear, I do not want all of that. I do not like to be punished. Although a little warmer climate. I mean, I am in the Netherlands, so a little warmer. I do not mind that. I of course posted a snippet of that on my Twitter, just to kind of ridicule it a bit. You know, the people like they keep trying that. You know, like the old school. You know, conversion by force. You know, we'll just tell you how much you're going to burn in hell, and you do not want that, so you'll convert. That's how that works. You know. And yeah, Matt, you came with some stuff, like a reaction on that, like about the translation and the Hebrew text and how it's like, you know, not what they think they are, and of course, Todd being a good Christian had to defend that, and you know, with a little bit of back and forth, Todd,
Yeah.
like you, I mean, Matt, as you like mentioned, Todd, like we were gonna do this show anyway. You know, kind of going into what has been said in that Twitter thread.
Sure.
And I
And if I
just
may,
sure
the letter that you were sent, the portion I saw anyway, there's presumably more of it.
lots.
Yes, that was I don't think a serious attempt at conversion or even really communication. It just seemed to be rude on the whole. Like from what little I could read from that first snippet, I probably theologically agree with most of what's being said, but that's not how I would approach a friend or even just a random person on the street. As may not surprise pretty much anyone listening, standing on the corner of a street yelling at everyone that they're going to hell, even if true, will probably not help them make other choices.
No,
They'll just think
definitely
you're
not.
crazy or mean. Um, and this is that letter unfortunately was that way. So at least from what I could see. So that sucks, and I'm sorry that you got that. Yeah,
Well, I mean, I'm kind of used to it by now that, you know, I'm getting yelled at for believing the wrong gods, or that my gods are like demons pretending to be gods. You know, I think I've heard it all by now from various sources and various people. And I try to tell everyone that, you know, I do see the value in the Christian teachings. You know, as a mystery school, it is absolutely valid. There's a lot to be said for it, which, you know, we will get into, because you two know a lot more about it than I do. You have studied a lot more about it. But you know, especially one of my more recent guests, Pamela Walk. You know, I tried to tell her, you know, I see the value, I acknowledge it, and all of that, and it just didn't want to register that. Like, but then why are you not Christian if you do see the value? It's like, well, because it's not the religion for me. Like, I found my path in Germanic paganism. Like, can I, you know, just be pagan and still see the value, or do I like have to be Christian?
now that that does presuppose, right, that the claims of the Bible are not true. If they are true, then of course you should change, right? If the claim if the claim the Bible makes, right, that Jesus is the Son of God, that there's only really one God, and that ultimately we will all stand before Him for judgment, and that will be unpleasant for me included. I'm not perfect either. Um, if that's true, then obviously that should affect things, right?
Yeah,
And so,
and I
so
think even like that's where the thing started from, right?
mhm,
Where the email that Stein received, the guy makes some claims about how it should be,
mhm,
and then my attempt was to poke it a little bit because of the use of language.
yeah,
You can get people sometimes with that if they use it too literally, like, oh, this is specifically and so on and so on. And I
yeah,
guess
yeah,
that's where we can understand more, like, okay, what is it there? Because like the Bible is multiple things, right? There's not one book that somebody written in once and so on. Like, there's multiple things going on, and how can it be understood, and the different ways it was understood, and
sure,
and basically that was the poke, right, that
yeah,
initiated even
yeah,
the idea for the podcast. So
yeah,
the
and I think that's a really good segue. If you want to jump to kind of the end of what you wrote
Mhm.
with the Hebrew in
Yeah,
specific. So now privately, if you're comfortable with me repeating
yeah,
what yeah, privately you did mention that yes, you are aware that your translation of Satan was not correct.
Yeah, as in there's the nuance, right?
Yeah,
Because there's
yeah,
the what do you call it? Let's say the character Satan, that you have all the imagery and everything,
yeah,
and you have that specific segment which is using the word Satan as
yeah,
in
yeah.
adversary.
So for those who haven't read it though, the in Numbers 22 and in several places in the Bible and other spots, the word accuser or adversary is used. If we wanted to do a little joke translation into English, we could also say lawyer. Um, but that word, when in isolation or when led in with la, like la Satan, that word means is just a noun. It means like an adversary or an accuser, right? Whereas if it's ha Satan, that's the accuser or the adversary. And so in this particular text, it is talking about an accuser, not the accuser. And
Exactly.
that's a little hard to get, especially if you aren't familiar with the language and are unfamiliar just in general with translations and their challenges. And so that's that piece, right? And I think
Mhm.
that you agree that that is correct.
Yeah, the point there is more so if there's someone which believes like the again the literacy of the thing, as in, oh, if I read Satan, it means always red guy with horns and so on. Like that's not the case. If you go read it, like
Yeah,
if you believe that and you go read it, you see like the name of God lay Satan, and then it's like, oh, wait a second, you know what I
yeah.
mean? So it's to bring up that idea of, wait, I have to deepen my knowledge on this. I have to actually
Mhm.
read it and understand, and not just like I think we'll come up to, like just read the translations, because again on that bit of the meaning gets lost, and
Well,
that's it. Like do the research, right? Understand it a little bit
and
more deeply.
now that one most translations do an excellent job with. But there are words that are trickier, and one of the challenges is most ancient languages, not just Hebrew. Most ancient languages often had multiple meanings for the same word. This is less true in the modern era. Um, and so Elohim is an interesting one that you brought up, right? So Elohim in isolation, like just by itself, not in a sentence, no additional letters attached, just by itself, roughly speaking, means gods, plural. It can also mean essentially divinity or divine ones, um, but more or less gods. So in the example that you mentioned in Numbers, it's a bit more of a complex sentence. So I was hoping we could look at that word in two other places, like I mentioned to you. The first is Genesis 1, verse 1. So, and that is in English, normally translated something like, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Um, a more literal translation would be something closer to, "In the beginning, God's created the two heavens and the earth." The reason for the two heavens thing is because there is a kind of plural in Hebrew that is for pairs, like eyes, hands, this kind of thing. And that's the kind of tense, for lack of a better word, or the kind of plural that is being used for heavens. Okay? That is not the one that Elohim is. That would be a three or more kind of tense, right? Or a kind of multiple. However, the nuance is that there is a verb, I think it's bara, if I recall correctly, which is singular, attached to this plural noun. And so the context informs the meaning. It is why it is rendered God. And obviously for Christians, now that's true for Jewish people as well. Obviously for Christians, the notion of the Trinity, right, that is taught in the Scripture in the New Testament, when we look back at God being plural, doesn't bother us at all, because we believe in a God who is three and one, right? Uh, Hebrew Jewish people will struggle with that a little bit more. I think you'll find. Um,
Yeah.
Now, the second example of this word being used is from the beginning of the Shema, which is in Deuteronomy, and that is usually translated, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Now, the "our God" piece is a variation of Elohim, where you're attaching ownership. And so that's what that word is. And then Yahweh is the part that is translated as the Lord, right? And so that sentence is explaining the meaning again. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. Well, if that was alone, it would be gods, plural. And then you continue, the Lord is one. And so it's really challenging, I think, to translate Hebrew accurately without spending quite a bit of time studying it, because you get this kind of thing over and over and over, where just a little change substantially alters the meaning of the word, or even the number of the number in a noun.
Yeah, and that is without saying that Hebrew doesn't have, or before the nekudots, you didn't have really vowels. So a name like Yud He Vav He, like there's many ways you could pronounce it, really, if you didn't have the nekudots.
Yeah, to be
then
clear, this was not a pronunciation lesson. I will mispronounce things horribly.
Yeah, exactly. Because exactly, we'll butcher all the names here. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So, but that makes it even more challenging, because then you can say, well, what is really the name of it? If you ask, like, well, what is the name of him? Let's say of it, or whatever.
Sure.
Some would translate it as like Ya, or like in Portuguese you have Jeová, or like then it becomes I, so like Jeová, or like Ya or Ave, and then you have all the like transmutations of the same name, basically, right?
Well, that sounds very much like the Dutch Jehovah, for
Jehovah,
example.
exactly.
And like those are the Jehovah's Witnesses. You know, for example, the annoying people that come to your door and sell you the idea.
No, you're exactly correct. That is actually a variation of an attempt. Basically, it's filling in other vowels in the same Hebrew word. Jehovah is the same thing as Yahweh in terms of like the attempt to use the word. Jehovah's Witnesses, to be clear, are not Christians. They're a cult. They're a different group, but they are trying to use the name of God in the name of their group. And Jehovah was historically used for call it a couple centuries before we got access to more of the older Hebrew documents. Thanks to archaeology and thanks to, frankly, dumb luck in some cases, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have a better grasp than they did 2 centuries ago about how to read and pronounce older Hebrew, and also we also have closer to the modern era texts, like from a couple thousand years ago or 1,500 years ago. That include the vowels, right, that they understood at the time. Whereas very ancient Hebrew didn't, as you said, didn't write the vowels. And you can kind of see why. They didn't have paper, right? The Egyptians had papyrus, but the Israelites didn't have a paper production. So they were mostly writing on like animal skins. These are expensive to produce, right? And so you want to put as much content on a given sheet as you can. And one of the ways you do that is you skip vowels and you stick all the letters together. Especially if it's something that you've basically got memorized, which was very much the case for many rabbis and still is today, especially the first few books of the Bible that often have memorized. And so all you really need is like enough of a hint to remember what to say, right?
Exactly.
And so that's and Hebrew is not alone in this regard, in skipping vowels. This was done in ancient Greek sometimes as well. Again, for the same purpose, I suspect, which is paper was very expensive or parchment was very expensive.
Exactly.
Does that make sense to you guys?
It makes a lot of sense, and to me also it's where my practice, let's say, enters a little bit, where I can understand how the way it is constructed not only helps them with the hints, like you said, to remember it, but also to let's say encode things on it. And then you have on the Jewish mysticism side the people who have, let's say, they don't only read what is the letter, but they assign numbers to letters, and then they understand, okay, when something is being said, there's like a second meaning of it, like a code or hidden meaning on it. And then you can understand how actually putting more or less letters in this case would influence what you're saying, would influence. Because imagine like this, every letter has a certain number. So let's say A or Aleph, in their case, is like 1, and Beit is 2, and so on and so on. So if you have the name of God like Yud, He, Vav, He, meaning that's the literal letters, it will have a specific value. And if you had more or less letters, it will have a different value. And therefore the codifications that you're trying to do just don't work, basically. So that's another way of understanding as well how important it is actually to see then if you're doing this type of reading, to see the real one, the Hebrew or the Greek even.
Yeah, I think that the Kabbalah practice is significantly newer as far as the numerology type stuff. However, what was done historically, and you've probably heard of this, right, is they would count like letters in a line or lines on a page, and like check, does the last letter on this page does it match what I just copied? Like they would be checking in different ways, across, down, over. Like, did I copy this correctly? And obviously for religious texts, they were a lot more concerned about it, about getting it right. And so that was certainly done. And I do know of a few instances where that kind of number idea is used. But it tends to be more like 7 being a perfect number or multiples of 7. And a few other numbers. 6 is often used. 40 is often used. 12,
number of judgment,
and so on.
Even the 7 you have on the Genesis, like 1:1, right? You have 7, not letters, words. So you have bara. How's it? Wait a second. It's Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. If I'm not mistaken, those are 7. And then again, you have this idea continuously getting used, right? And now, if you ask me why the 7 is important, there's the idea of the 7, let's say, being a perfect number, but also there's the mystery schools aspect to it. Then you come back to Egypt, for example. You had 7 revealed schools, so those are the solar ones, and 7 hidden ones, so the lunar ones, which then became the 14 pirates of Osiris and whatever. Then you start to understand how all of this, like to me, when I made the first post, for example, is what I tried to bring, this idea of, okay, there is value in the teachings, and there is even more value if you like keep digging, basically. You can see how it correlates to similar cultures, and it's basically a synthesis of the same knowledge. It's like a continuation of the same knowledge you can get.
I think there's a danger in doing this in general with coded writing, and that's because it is very other than, of course, that the Bible never says to do this. That I should lead with that. This is an outside idea, right? That I would argue is not a good thing to do. But the danger, let's assume that there were a book that was deliberately written to have encoded messages, and those do exist. There's some that still haven't been decoded, actually. One really cool one from the Middle Ages in particular that you've probably seen, that has like lots of pictures of plants and stuff and writing that nobody can read.
The Voynich manuscript.
Anyway. So that's
Voynich manuscript.
Yeah, Voynich. Yeah, something like this. Yeah.
And so that is a coded book. There is a code, and we don't know how to read it. The danger of trying to use kind of a numerology approach is you can kind of impose meaning that isn't there. You can generate meaning that the original authors did not intend, and it's it's fairly easy to do. We could probably do it. This is a little joke for those of you who know some history. We could probably do it with The Catcher in the Rye. That book keeps getting found in murderers' homes, by the way.
For some
Just
reason,
an aside.
it's, yeah. But books have that effect on people, so we should all just stop reading books.
No, like
Just
that one specifically enough that like it started getting noted.
Oh,
Like the guy who killed what was it, John Lennon?
yeah.
Yeah, big Catcher in the Rye fan.
Never heard this.
Like,
John Lennon, the guy from the Beatles.
yeah, if you're bored, there's a whole rabbit hole to go down with that book if you're later. But
Yeah, I get your point. I understand it, but the way that I like, from my point of view, is that you're not basically the idea. And if you go with the Jewish mysticism, right, for example, the way they see it, you have 4 layers to understand everything, as in religious writing, right? In their case, the Torah. You have the from I forgot the name of the first one until Sod. So basically, go from literal to like seeing similar ideas, like seeing it as an analogy, then seeing references outside of the book, like maybe similar cultures that had something, or you try to fetch from outside of it, and then finally the Sod one, which is the most hidden and so on.
sure, again,
And
that does exactly what I described. You risk imposing meaning.
yeah, so exactly, but that's the idea. The Sod one is the one that brings you more to the esoteric side of the teaching than the exoteric, because it's basically the same as if you're putting something out there. For example, if you are the CEO of a company and you put something out there that is a part of what you're saying that most people are going to understand, and there is a part of what few people are going to understand, and they're going to do something with that information, which they understand. Oh, okay, so there's more to it than just what is being said. Basically, that's the idea.
Have you ever, now you're a native Portuguese speaker, so maybe you've avoided this particular joy. But have you ever listened to a literature professor trying to claim deeper meaning for novels, say, from the 1800s? Have you ever had a class like that, maybe in high school or college?
From the top of my head, not really. Mostly because I also wasn't extremely interested in those. I was more of a math,
Yeah.
like
Well,
science kind of person.
I have had that experience, and
Mhm.
and this often included, not always, this often included claims that directly contradicted the author's own writing, which is to say, the author wrote what they meant in a separate document, and the thing they were teaching in the class contradicted not only what you'd probably get out of reading the novel, it also contradicted the author's own opinion about their writing. And that's common. It's quite common, especially in English literature. Yes, I am looking at some of you teachers. And that kind of thing is something that you're definitely going to risk, especially looking at anything written as a written for another purpose. There are books written for the purpose you describe, like the one we were talking about from the Middle Ages. But, for example, the Bible itself, or even just taking the Old Testament, if you're into Kabbalah, right? The Old Testament itself is not one kind of writing. You have historical documents, you have letters, you have prophecies, you have poems, you have song lyrics, you have an entire romantic play is one of the books, Song of Songs, and I'm not sure if I recommend reading that first, but it is graphic if you understand the imagery. Like but yeah, it's a whole like romantic thing between this bridegroom and bride, and like their friends as they're like becoming married, right? These are very different kinds of writing, and clear, and were not even often written for the same audiences. For example, the book of First and Second Kings, or Kings, depending on how you want to break it up, appears to be basically just a chunk of historical writing written more or less when the people who were around, who are listed, were being described. Like it was written still during the time there were kings in Israel or Judah. Whereas Chronicles, or First and Second Chronicles, covers the same period, but was not written during that time. It was a retrospective, looking back at how the collapse of Israel and Judah happened. And so you get very different, you have very different purposes to the books, and also a little bit different content because they have different goals.
Exactly. And that's in the 4 layers. That would basically be the third one, where you're understanding like why was it written, or how, and what was the context, and so on. Because again, you cannot read something if you don't have the background of it, right? Or I mean, you can, but you're just gonna get that amount of meaning, right? Like if for example, even let's get the example of the email that Stein received, right? It's like, it's one email, okay, but what was behind that guy's mind? It could be that he didn't even know Stein. He could just like have sent an automated message, right? Mm-hmm. And if you don't fetch into that, then you can start getting to all these crazy ideas and so on. And I agree with you. There's at some point a kind of I wouldn't say limit, but there's just sometimes it's enough. Like you understood enough of the text, you don't need to dig deeper if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. But the way that I understand the thought level readings, which would be those, can be numerological, but sometimes not necessarily. It's just you're comparing symbols, really, is what you're doing. You can, I wouldn't call it like a logical approach necessarily, but you can compare it, right? You can compare the symbols. You can understand, okay, this story overall is talking about that symbology, and I have here another story which more or less talks about the same symbology. So I can understand the similar value both can bring to me, for example, or I can make correlations between them, and then I can understand more about one or the other. So it's kind of like you're making a bridge between them, even though they not necessarily were made with that intent. You can see how it happens, because suppose I ask you to create something new. You cannot create something new with things you don't know. You can only create things, or create anything, really, right? If I ask you to write a book, you cannot write a book about something you don't have in your head. And you're always fetching things from the outside.
At least not a good book.
Exactly. You can write some gibberish, right? but even that, you can only write something from what you have inside of you, let's say. Mm-hmm. So my point is that even if I'm trying to do my book being the most original I want and I can, I'm gonna be getting that information from elsewhere, like wanting it or not, because that's just how the information came to me first, right? Like I read somewhere something, or I saw something happen, and it could be that people, and that's like eventually what is one of the ways of understanding most of the religious stories, for example, as some kind of looking at the stars, because then you understand, okay, wait a second. So if people have a very similar story, they never met, they probably are coming from the same source. So what is that source? Some people will claim, oh, they're looking at the stars, for example. So they are watching the movement of the stars, and they are coming with the stories about those. That's one way.
Yeah, and nowadays we call that astrotheology.
Yeah, that's one way of understanding it.
It's very interesting. And to that point, also, like those books are like very much written, also for the people of those times. And one example that I know, and that most basic mainstream Christians seem to be obsessed with, is the return of Christ. The thing that everyone knows.
Absolutely, we can jump 5,500 years, sure.
But doesn't it say, like, specify in I don't know the book. I'm not a biblical scholar of any kind, but doesn't it say that he will come back in their lifetime? Like when that is spoken, that it's like,
you're talking
he'll
about
come
John.
back in our lifetime. So
if you Well, one, it does say quite literally more than once that the day and hour will not be known.
Yeah.
That of Christ's return. But also, the context, the story you're talking about, is actually related by John, who is the subject of the comment, which was basically Jesus was telling Peter something,
Mhm.
and and said, and Simon Peter replied, "Well, what about him?" Pointing at John, and Jesus is like, "Well, if I want him to live till I return, what's that to you?" And so John's relating this story and says, "But he didn't say he would return in my lifetime. This is just basically this is just a comment he made to Peter." That's the verse you're talking about. It's near the end of John, if you
Okay.
want to look it up later. But it's not. John himself is quite clear that that is not what Jesus meant.
Okay, then I must have misunderstood it, or everybody tells tells it more spectacularly than
Yeah.
it actually. I mean, got to drive views, got to drive clicks, right? So
Related note: the comment I see on YouTube, which is I'm going to assume a little facetious. I'm going to respond to as well briefly. So,
Sure.
why was Jesus with a naked boy? A, young man. B, he was clothed. His clothing was grabbed by a guard, and he ran out of his clothes. So, that's also in John. That's in Mark actually. And the man running out of the clothing is presumably John Mark, because he's the only gospel that relates that information. So no, they weren't hanging out naked. That's something you've imposed.
Yeah, and that's like again the problem of sometimes just picking like specific verses and trying to like instead of reading the whole context and
Oh yeah.
really understand everything. But as Stein said, like about the Christ coming back, for example, that's another thing that you can see on throughout many different cultures, older, newer, different, never met, sometimes met. You can see, for example, the Vedics, now called Hindus, they believe there's the 10th incarnation of Vishnu that should come, like Kalki. Similar idea, like he'll come to redeem or whatever. You have the Buddhists expecting a kind of like cosmic Buddha. I think it's Maitreya, something like that. You have the Jewish still expecting their Messiah that didn't come yet. There's like a whole list of requirements for the guy to come. Apparently, he didn't come yet. So and then like
So,
you keep having this.
on the one hand, right? On the one hand, um, I can freely agree that there are some commonalities between religions, which you would expect, right? Among other things, because if there is a true religion, if for example the claims in the Bible are true, then there will be religions that are closer and further away from that truth. That's going to happen because
Exactly.
people make mistakes, and people are evil, and obviously over time errors can happen even without deliberate action, right? So so that in no way means that there is no truth. The right.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Exactly.
also does not mean that, and in fact it will tend to mean that not all paths are equally valid, actually. um the so the so there are some challenges there. Now the historical Christian perspective, of course, and you guys are probably familiar with this, is that um because of the creation account. Have you guys read that? I'm betting Matt has. Have you, Stein?
Creation what, sorry?
The creation account in Genesis.
Creation account in English, maybe I'm not getting
God making the world
okay, yeah.
in Genesis. Sure.
Okay.
Stein, have you read that?
I don't think I've read that, but like I'm somewhat familiar with the text and how the
So
whole creation part goes.
Okay. Well, the Christian and Jewish perspective, right, is that humans initially began with the knowledge of God because he was directly interacting with them. And it wasn't until later on that they switched to like praying to him, right? That they were in some way seeing him personally. It talks about him like walking with them in the garden. It talks about it even talks about in those days they began calling on the name of the Lord. That's describing the beginning of prayer. And so the Christian and Jewish perspective is that basically the relation between religions is a branching and a collapse away from the true starting point, right? Right. So you don't have to agree, but that's the Christian and Jewish perspective. So it doesn't bother me at all that some religions are more or less similar to Christianity. That's what I would expect, right?
Exactly. I'm totally there with the idea that there is like let's call it a source or like a path, right? And it's just maybe the difference is that from my point of view, that path keeps updating. Let's say it's not going to be one path, and like if you don't go to that, then it's whatever, damnation forever, and so on, so on. And again, we can agree to disagree. But even, for example, I'm translating a book. It's called, I'm calling it in English The Archaeometer, but the original is in French. I think it will be called Les Archaeometres or whatever. And the guys they are from, again, that understanding of kaabalah and mystical things and so on. And they also understand that idea of a proto-synthesis, let's call it this way, like the source. But they understand around their time, this is like 100 years ago when the book was launched, that Christianity for them was the last and the more correct synthesis. It was basically like the one that got it. They call it the word, just like I think the Bible calls it, right? The word, as in there. But they see the value on past attempts to get there. Let's say they can understand the correlation.
I have a quick question because it might just be an English versus Portuguese question. So to clarify, when you say synthesis, do you mean a combining of things?
A synthesis, as in like you have a thesis, right? I present you something, you can present something back, like an antithesis, and then we come to some of that. Like let's say I'll bring you some ideas, you'll bring others, and then we'll get the best out of them and get.
So you mean a combining thing? Yeah. Okay. So
exactly.
So obviously, that's not the Christian perspective or or mine, right? And so but I do follow what you're saying, and now as it relates, and I'm interested in talking about that a bit more, but we should get, especially for the people who on Twitter saw the posts, we should get to your kind of broader claim and the narrow examples. And if you're willing, I would be interested to talk about your examples and then the broader claim, like in detail.
Yeah,
just kind of. So the broader claim, if I understand it correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, your claim is that the Old Testament anyway, because that's primarily what you were talking about.
That occasion,
that the Old Testament is largely a combining of various sources from other cultures, that it is not itself original, and that is borrowing from other places. And you gave a couple examples, which was, and I'm going to use the kind of the more common name for the guy, but one of the claims was that Balaam was a created character, so not a real man, who was inspired by by Zoroaster. And second,
to give a little bit more context on that one, it's not that him itself, not that there never existed like a Balaam character, but the character there on the Bible was, let's say, refurbished, if you can call it like that, or embellished. Let's say the story changed a little bit. Basically, that's what I'm saying. That specific Balaam, that they have to get the story from somewhere.
You're pretty clear. Created character. Yeah. That's made up. That's what that means. Yeah. But the second one is that Moses was also imaginary or a created character and was based on an Egyptian pharaoh whose name I'm going to butcher now. Akhenaten?
Akhenaten, something like that. Yeah, basically a sum of a lot of characters like that. The idea is not that there was no like that those histories never existed, it's all imagination and so on. Sure, there were stories that stories as in something historical, something happened. It could be similar to what they say, but it's like they can get attributes from other stories to make it either more powerful or less powerful, or to show something more or less.
So one of the so basically my my response to that, I think, is fairly simple, but if we can take one at a time. So Zoroaster, do you know when his followers said he lived?
If I'm not mistaken, is like 1,400, 1,500 before Christ or something.
No. His followers said he lived 258 years before Alexander the Great.
And that would be in DC, AC?
So that would be about 500 BC to 600 BC, in that range.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have to assume that when they say from Alexander the Great, that they could mean from the time we got conquered by him. They could also mean from the time he was born. So we can have a little wiggle room in that regard, because they don't specify.
Yeah,
Presumably
so
people in the period would know, but we're not them.
Wikipedia says, just like basically looking up Alexander the Great, from 356 to 323 BC.
Yeah. And so the followers of Zoroaster said that he lived 258 years before Alexander. The occasion was actually the rise of the Sassanid Empire. Or not the Sassanid, I misspoke, I'm sorry. Their precursors. When Alexander the Great's generals, the Seleucids, really similar names, same area, sorry, when the Seleucids took over, they started to impose a new religion on the region. And the Zoroastrians obviously didn't like this, and were pretty busily defending their religion, and were doing, and that was the context in which, well, here's when we started. Zoroaster lived in this date, and that is not the only time, but the specific quote is, let me see here, is from the, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that. I'll spell it for you, though. Bundahishn. It is from that document, and is correlated in Aminius Marcellinus from the 4th century AD. He says the same thing about when the Zoroastrian religion started. And then later, even on, which I actually just knew by accident, this I looked up when you wrote about it. I was like, well, let me check into that a little bit. In the 1800s, when the British, and early and late 1700s, when the British started visiting Persia more regularly, the Zoroastrians then told them something very similar. But that's obviously much more recent. And I had read that in, what's the name of the book? The Age of Revelation, by a guy named Elias Boldino, or something like that. It's French last name. Great book. If you ever want to read it, I would love to discuss it with you guys. It is both interesting, I think, thought-provoking. Some of the stuff it describes, you can look up and check yourself, which I really like as an argument style, to say this thing is true and here's how you can check, right? But also, anyway, that's an aside. But so I was aware of when the Zoroastrians claimed they were around. I was not aware of how far back that's documented. That's over 1,600 years ago. They were saying 258 years before Alexander.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, do you have the context that Zoroaster is actually like a lineage, as have multiple Zoroasters?
That is a theory that is not, in fact, what any historical text says. And when we judge history, it is important that we actually go with what history says and not what we might wish. Is that
Yeah,
possible? Sure, that's possible.
exactly.
But it is not what any historical document says from the period. In fact, the followers were quite specific that there was one guy and he taught them the religion of Abraham. It is only later, closer to our period, that people are adding this idea. Now, the only source.
Yeah, because it becomes kind of like a title, similar to how Buddha, you have like Buddha, let's call it first or whatever, like the guy that first did it, and then you have following people that maybe achieved similar levels or something that you can
even if we pretended,
attach
even
a
if we
title.
took that to be the case, that doesn't deal with the problem, which is that
Mhm.
the guy's too late. You're claiming is the source for Balaam, and the thing is, we have physical evidence of Balaam from 900
Mhm.
BC.
Mhm.
Specifically, we have plaster from the inside of a pagan temple that was written on in black, red, and one other color of ink. I couldn't find that color, but someone wrote on the plaster, right? And when the temple was destroyed, the building collapsed, the plaster broke up. Well, someone
Mhm.
got really bored, I guess, or had a horrible semester because they got to put together the plaster like a jigsaw puzzle. That does not sound fun. But they managed to assemble two major portions of the plaster and were able to read a lot of the writing. And this is the Deir Allah inscription. That is spelled Deir. And then the next word is
Mhm.
Alla. And it begins, "This is the book, or these are the words, of Balaam, son of Beor, a seer of the gods. To him came the gods at night, and they spoke to him according to the utterance of El, and they spoke to Balaam, son of Beor, thus," and then there's a break. "And Balaam arose in the morning," another break. And then it continues. This format, and we get a couple longer chunks later on, matches the style of Balaam's four prophecies, or four blessings, depending on your point of view, found in Numbers 22 and 23. And this is not an Israelite ruin. This is a civilization that hated and was regularly at war with Israel that we have this artifact from. Now, in
Mhm.
history, generally, when you have in historical studies, when you have a civilization say something is true and their enemy agrees, it's probably true. And in this
Mhm.
case, the specific being that Balaam, son of Beor, was a prophet speaking from God, was in fact believed. Whether or not he was actually speaking from God is a different question. But he was a guy who was there that people believed was speaking from God. And we have physical artifacts from about 700 years before, from at a minimum 400 years before the birth of Zoroaster, which means Zoroaster cannot be the source.
Have you came upon I don't know if I don't remember right now if it's an article or like an excerpt from somewhere. It's called "On the Date of Zoroaster."
You mean Mary's article?
I don't know the name of the guy. I just remember the title.
Mary Boyce. Yeah.
I'm
So
not sure. I
so
remember it's called "On the Date of Zoroaster."
yeah, I know
I
what you're
remember
talking
that's
about.
the.
So Mary Boyce is the argument for the old date. So what Mary does, and if you have a doctorate or something, Mary, and you're listening to this, I'm sorry, your title was not in what I read. But but what she wrote is this. She reads. It appears she reads Old Sanskrit, right? Which is
Mhm.
mostly, we've got copies of copies. We don't have a lot of really old
Yeah.
originals for obvious reasons. They fall apart. And then, of course, you've got some on stone, which is usually hard to date unless you've got some really specific fungus, because then its growth rate helps you date the writing if it grows over the writing, right? But generally speaking, it's really hard to date um, carved writing in stone other than by what it says. And the same, and so What she is doing is she is using that and Sanskrit writing and is arguing that her understanding of Sanskrit and how it is related to an ancient Persian language called, I'm not going to try to say that, it starts with an A. Um, that she, by comparing them, can herself determine the age of the Persian writing. Now, this is roughly the equivalent of claiming that you can use Middle French to date something written in Middle English. That is not a good dating system. Also, that is the one she is arguing for, to push Zoroaster back somewhere between, and the dates given vary, but somewhere between, call it 900 to 1700 BC. But her only evidence is comparative language, not what people who were following Zoroaster said, not what a historian whose name was Ammianus Marcellinus or Marcellinus said, not what even the people following this religion in the 1800s said, just what she decided, based on comparative linguistics, comparing it to things she can't accurately date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure.
This is not a good source.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's this one. I think I found it here as an article. Mm-hmm. It's from Williams Jackson.
Sure.
And they I mean, we're not going to read it here, but just to give an idea, they say there are some passages that are claimed to place Zoroaster at around 6,000 BC, and they mention some guys. They mention Pliny the Elder. They mention Plato. They mention basically texts that would keep the claim. Let's say that will support that claim, right? I think it's even extremely a quick reading. I think it's 22 pages or something like that.
Yeah. So
and it also talks about that the Allah thing I don't remember the first part, but the something Allah thing you mentioned, where making the comparison from Balaam to Zoroaster on that side as well.
Yeah. So that claim is not, as far as I can tell, is not based on any history. Now, I will say that Pliny the Elder is an excellent source when it comes to natural history. That man has been proven right more than once about things he said that people who were alive in our lifetimes, well, maybe not yours, you're a little younger, Matt, but Stein and I's lifetimes, that proved that it turned out he was right. Although one was yours. So one was that he claimed gray whales were swimming in the Mediterranean. That happened again when COVID happened. When shipping slowed down, the gray whales returned. And so he turned out he was right. He that was in fact true. And what had changed was we basically made it noisy, so they didn't want to be there with all the modern shipping.
I feel that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can give another point of view as well, but just to get from the text here, so you understand where it itself is coming from.
Yeah.
From the Pliny the Elder, for example, it says here Pliny the Elder cites the authority of Eudosux of Cnidus. Not sure, I'm probably butchering the names, of Aristotle and of Hermicus for placing Zoroaster 6,000 years before the death of Plato, or 5,000 years before the Trojan War. And then there's some thing in Latin, I'm pretty sure.
Let me quick try to find the quote.
Yes, I can see if I can send you the.
I mean, you can send the link in the private chat if you want to. But that sounds a lot like just throwing names around to
you can
say,
get the text so it makes more sense.
These people prove me right, so try and prove me wrong.
Yeah, I just found it. So the Pliny the Elder.
It's from the Williams Jackson guy.
No, not the article. Pliny the Elder. That's the thing he's hinging his argument on. That's the thing you should read.
Yeah, it's one of the the book. It's the article itself has a lot of arguments, and I'm not even sure if the article is trying to prove Zoroaster's time. It's just it's basically trying to fetch from where people are getting that idea.
Okay,
That's
Todd,
what the
what
dark
did-
text.
Yeah. So
So what did you find?
basically Pliny the Elder. Now he's writing first century BC. Wait, BC? Yes. No, AD. So Pliny the Elder, writing about 1900 years ago, give or take 50, say. He lived for a while.
Mhm.
He was writing that Zoroaster basically invented magic, or was the progenitor of the Magi in the East.
Yeah, the
That,
Magi. Yeah.
right. So, and his dating appears to just be based on, just what he says. He doesn't quote anybody. The primary claim he's making is just that they invented magic, basically, which is kind of odd. But I get why you might write that. However, as far as dating goes, obviously the people who were living in the region and who were copying the texts and who were familiar with the history are the people you'd want to believe. Also, generally speaking, you want to go to the oldest sources. And in this case, we have two old sources that are in agreement and don't agree with Pliny. So yeah, but this has to do with
Again, we'll that argument we will. I think on this topic we can agree to disagree because basically that's the point. From my understanding, even the historical bits are nice, are cool, and like it's an interesting path to follow, right? But the one that I usually am most interested in and that I can understand how the correlations come to be is when you go through the, let's say, the mysteries path. So basically when you understand again what the things are trying to teach, for example, when you go to the Magi and you understand what the Zoroaster was talking about and so on, and when you see, for example, what Moses was talking about, and you see what maybe someone from the Vedas was talking about and so on.
So
and you can understand the context behind them. So it stops being like, oh, I need the historical, like I need a tablet or something, because you understand most of these were, well, first of all, they were oral, so it's like a transmission based, basically. So even the Kabbalah, for example, they believe you have to be initiated, you have to receive the revelation, right? You cannot just, I'm just reading a Kabbalah book and then I know it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's again, it's this difference that we are going to be this, we're going to have this contrast, and I think that's interesting, where you are going to try to come with the historical part, the more, let's say, let's prove it, let's find the artifacts, and that's really cool. And I'm bringing the other point of view, which is, okay, there's the, let's call it the occult side to all of this.
Oh, I follow. I follow.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, if you want to find what is true, and in particular, what people really meant when they wrote things in history, you have to read what they wrote in context, like we were talking about. And when you have evidence that shows that that newer ideas aren't true, or at least weren't meant by the original authors, you need to take that into account. In this case, the specific claim you were making was basically that Zoroaster was the source for Balaam. If anything, the reverse would be true in terms of timeline. Also, in terms of timeline, it's very interesting to note that according to the Zoroastrians themselves, they are following the religion of Abraham. That's what they claim. And that's what they've claimed for centuries, in fact. And that the timing that they claim for Zoroaster matches perfectly with the Jewish captivity into Babylon and subsequently into Persia, when Persia took over Babylon. Or put another way, it is incredibly likely that Zoroaster was himself a Jew, because of the kinds of things that they learned. They have their own version of the Mosaic Law. They have an understanding of a monotheistic God. They were, in fact, expecting a Messiah right around the exact same time as Jesus showed up. These are not surprising things, I suspect, if you've read their writings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I am arguing that, in fact, they are a Jewish cult.
I mean, I'm kind of looking things up as well as you're mentioning things just using Brave Search because
Yeah.
they're not actually biased. Zoroaster is considered a prophet in the Baha'i faith and the Amidaya
Yeah,
branch
they've split it a bit. Yeah.
branch
Yeah.
of Islam, both classified as Abrahamic religions, and
Yeah.
in the Baha'i faith, Zoroaster is seen as a manifestation of God sharing an exalted station with other prophets, including Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah.
One cool, just weird aside. So in Persia how they are mostly Muslim, although there is a growing Christian minority and there's also like some atheists and stuff, but mostly Muslim, right? So there's one day a year that they all basically forget they're Muslim and and have a fire festival, which is from their old religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fire. That's again the fire initiations from
Yeah.
from the Magi and so on.
So-
So that's the idea. There's always going to be the exoteric, like the outside teachings, which is like the books you can find and the tablets and so on and so on. But all of these, we can again come to Europe, come to the Middle East, come to China, come to Mesoamerica, come to any certain like mystery school really, is going to have its exoteric, so the internal teachings, which not necessarily are meant to be found really. So that's the problem we have. It's kind of like you have a government top secret project going on. It's not like the government expects it to be like for everybody to know really. And that's going to be the problem here, because it's like I cannot bring, let me get you the esoteric paper. Oh, here it is. Like here's what people are saying.
How mystery cults work? Because what you're describing is a mystery cult. We could make one today. We shouldn't. That would be evil. But mystery cults are. We have this secret, and if you join in, we can teach you more and more and reveal. And usually, it's a way to farm people for money. Scientology is one of the more ridiculous ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have the pyramid schemes and whatever. But what I'm saying is, for example, when you get the history of Masonry, it's basically people that knew things that at the time shouldn't really be public. For example, they knew how to build like catapults. They knew how to build like bridges. They knew how to build things that at that point in time, were basically military knowledge. Right? They were architects. They were everything.
You're confusing, I think, two groups. But let me make sure I'm clear on what you mean. Do you mean the Masons,
Freemasonry,
Masonic lodges?
Yeah, Freemasonry, exactly.
Oh yeah,
so
you're entirely wrong.
No, if you go to the roots of Freemasonry, you can understand they go back to, for example, Egyptian times. That's basically where all the start of this something before, because it wasn't like organized really up until when they really met in London. If I'm pretty sure, they met in London when like London was burned to the ground and they needed basically people to rebuild it. And now you had everyone.
Freemasonry is a lot
getting
older
together.
Than that. And Freemasonry takes from a lot of different teachings.
So,
like there is
exactly,
no. But been to a Masonic lodge? I have.
Yeah.
Have you been to any of their rituals? I have.
Yeah. So the Kabbalah, it's all based in Kabbalah. So after you learn it is
not according to Freemasons anyway.
Well, the lower Freemasonry cannot know it, but it's again, you have all the symbology here. You have all the two columns. You have the G. You have basically everything. Again, when you have the keys, that's what I'm trying to say here, that we are gonna run in circles.
Freemasonry is filled with different kinds of symbolism, and a whole lot is Christian symbolism.
Yeah,
it's
Christian Kabbalah a lot of the times.
They take from many different religions. I have been at least invited once to a lodge, but I never went.
Yeah, but to come back to
one of the precepts is that you like believe in a God. It doesn't. They don't specify necessarily which God. You have to believe. That is.
Yeah, but just to come to the
core premise.
Exactly. Just to come to the first point to close it. Basically, the idea is that around that time, when you have certain secrets, again, this happens today. The government has top secret things. It's not necessarily something for everybody to know. Around that time, simpler things like knowing how to read and how to build like an aqueduct and how to build like a tower, how to build bridges and
But
things like that, basically, were like they needed to be secret. Because what if you come, let's say I have my tribe here and I'm fine. You come, I teach you everything. You come next week with a whole people and you just get everything from me, basically. So you need it to be initiated so that you can prove like, okay, that I trust you. You know, I'll put a little bit of fear in you.
okay,
I'll put some tests. That's the point of a mystery school.
Didn't Freemasonry get started through the Knights Templar? They weren't allowed to practice openly anymore.
Right. So
I'm using a name. I'm using a name so you can understand where, let's say, what we are talking about. But the basis of it comes back again. You have to go to the root. So it comes back to Egyptian rites. It comes back to things even older than that. That's the idea.
That's the problem, right? So what you're making again is a historical claim, and that is that's provably false. Stein is quite correct about the source of Freemasonry. Broadly speaking, it wasn't an immediate takeover, right?
No,
there was
it was a development.
But a few generations later, which is to say, Freemasonry is relatively young, at 500 or 600 years tops, and probably a bit less actually. And also, Freemasonry itself disagrees with many of the things you were saying, and I know this because I've spent some time with Freemasons. I don't agree
what degree?
With their beliefs. Generally, obviously, I also believe in one God, but I'm also not sure. Are you now? This will take a little reading, but have you guys ever read about the actual history, not the sensational stuff, but like the period documents about the Illuminati? Are you aware of them?
The Bavarian Illuminati, you mean?
Yeah.
Like the
and in specific, how they took over the Freemasons. Yeah. Modern Freemasonry is not the same as it was in the 1700s. Their beliefs have changed entirely. Some of the symbols remain. And one of the ways you can tell, you can check if you don't believe me, you can read George Washington writing about it happening in Europe and how it hadn't happened in the US yet. You can read letters where he names the leaders who were doing it. These are publicly available, scanned online for you to read, and typed up because that man's handwriting was terrible. And further, in the 1850s, you can read letters from Thomas Jackson, which again are publicly available, talking about how they were taking over the American lodges by that point, which is another 75, 80 years later. And how the particular lodge he was part of had not yet been taken over, but some of the other ones in the US had. This is a historical phenomenon. So the notion that modern Freemasonry is related to ancient Egyptian secrets is absolutely ridiculous on a historical level.
Again, we come back to the point. Things have some kind of source, some kind of root. And if you go to the roots of how, again, it's...
Yeah, but the root of Freemasonry is not Hermeticism.
It most definitely is. That's the problem. Like Blackwall, you said you went to a lodge.
Freemasonry may have a lot of Hermetic influence that I will acknowledge. Yes, absolutely. But original Freemasonry, how it got started, and I looked it up real quick. Like George Washington, he did indeed join. Before the Bavarian Illuminati was even founded, he joined in 1752, which was well before, like 24 years before the Bavarian Illuminati was a thing.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, from then they started to indeed infiltrate the lodges, if you will, planting their own seeds and ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
And
because if it gets too powerful, then it's a problem.
Yeah, I mean that's the case with everything. But modern Freemasonry is taking very much from Hermeticism, taking a lot from Egypt. Original Freemasonry is very Christian
But-
in
but-
nature.
And
but that's the point. That's the point. It's not that like we have to use some kind of name, right? Because if we are talking when we started, let's come back to the start. We were talking about mystery schools, right? So I tried to give an example. Freemasonry is a type of mystery school where if you go back to its roots, if you come back to like how people came to have something like, oh, I want to be a Freemason. It's not like, from nowhere. So there's some trace. And that's not me saying, oh, what I believe. That's me saying something that I hear from guys top in the Freemasonry. And they talk about it publicly, even. It's not like necessarily. You can be initiated on it as well, which in this case, as I'm saying, I have been or have in touch with people that have been. But you can see people that are initiated and talking about this kind of things. Because it's, again, it comes back to that idea that if there is something that just a certain level of people will get to know, it's less likely that thing will be out in the public, and it will be like some historical, like we can just find it. Let's say
but Matt,
that's what I'm saying.
are you following why in this specific instance that's a problem? Because modern Freemasonry is entirely unmoored from historical Freemasonry. So any historical secrets that you might imagine that they had aren't what they'd have now.
Sure. Today is completely different. And that was not the initial claim. The initial claim was to give you some idea of how a mystery school comes to be and why is it important. It's not necessarily just, oh, I'm getting people for my cult, just like today it happens. It's just this idea, this notion that you needed some kind of initiation before sharing specific topics. And even today, that still happens, again, with top secret programs. You cannot just, oh, I know a weapon. I know how to build some big weapon, and I'll just give it away to everybody. Or I know how to build the best AI possible, and I'll just give it away to everybody. It doesn't work like that.
Initiation is a thing of all groups,
Exactly.
all levels.
And
I mean, there are street gangs. Most street gangs, require some sort of very violent, very bloody initiation.
And my point with that was, again, if we are going to, because we're talking about Zoroaster and all the historical parts of it, we can find historical parts of things, especially on the exoteric part, but on the esoteric is going to be much harder, because again, it was all behind initiations, behind coded things, and like double talk, let's say, that then it's like, how can you really have a text on that? People are not writing about it.
That's kind of going into the notion that everything is a conspiracy and nothing is true.
Yes.
Not necessarily, because you can compare it.
No, that's the point. Yeah, no, of course, but they're saying that the exoteric, what you can find in books, in libraries, online, whatever, is so incredibly different from the esoteric, and that the true secrets are, only held within the groups, within the lodges. I mean, if that was true, then we wouldn't be talking about it.
No, it's more so with time it comes to be, but then you lose the track. If you don't hold the keys, then you lose the track. It's kind of like if you imagine a circle, the exoteric will be in the outer circle, and you can find a lot of things about it, right? Because again, it's out there. But the deeper you go, the harder it is to find a lot of things that correlate, unless you went to the middle as well. Then it's very easy.
Like that's also, you say that you speak a lot with higher level Freemasons. Who's to say that their personal beliefs do not bleed into the things that they tell you? I mean,
for sure, but I'm not. I'm not talking only
as,
like
as an example. We have a Kabbalist, a Christian, and a pagan here. We all have our own ideas. We all have our own ideas of where things come from. We have all read different sources, interpreted them in different ways. To Todd, the Bible means something else than it does to you. To you, the Bible means something else than it does to me. So I understand that you're kind of, trying to find common ground, that you're, trying to find examples. But it's much more nuanced than that. So kind of, stepping aside from that, but kind of staying on Zoroastrianism, I am really curious about this one also, because there's a member of the tribe of Greyhorn Pagans, very valued member, who follows Mithras, which is said to be like kind of a derivative of Zoroastrianism and a rival religion to Christianity.
Yeah, that's it was really popular in the legions. Interestingly, it wasn't terribly popular in the Roman Empire as a
Yeah,
whole.
it
But
was very much a military
yeah,
religion. Yeah.
yeah, and it was once again a
Hmm.
mystery religion. Unfortunately, in a way, because as you know, I enjoy history. Uh, Unfortunately, in a way, many of its teachings were lost precisely because of the problem that you described, which is
Yeah.
the cult kept it orally, didn't write it down, and eventually died. And the
It's the problem with
died
a
out both
lot
in
of
popularity and also
yeah.
personally. And so the what we have is basically what people outside were aware of. And so broadly speaking, it was yeah, broadly speaking, it was a an interesting cult that was particularly appealing in the standard mystery cult ways, and in the like sacrifice of blood for restitution or atonement. That it was really interested in that idea, and particularly cow's blood or bull's blood.
bulls. Yeah.
Um, but the but most of the teachings are just lost to time.
Yeah.
And
Be-
the
So, but
the
being
because
such
there.
a sorry,
Go
but
on.
being such a close rival to Christianity, um, to Todd, to your knowledge, Matt, to your knowledge, one one at a time, please. I know we're all
Mhm.
very very
Yeah,
passionate
Blackwall.
people, um, but would it have influenced Christianity in some way? Like, would it have taken would the Christian teachings like kind of taken from Mithraism to as kind of happened with Catholicism in the more modern days, like hey, see, this is exactly the same. So like your God's kind of my God, your prophet's kind of like my prophet.
I think I see what you're saying. So I
Just a
think
question, but
yeah. So the timing and culture would be off. I think because you have to remember the Mithras religion was in the rival Sassanid Empire
hmm
before spreading to the army in Rome in the Roman Empire. Christianity started in the Roman Empire rather than the Persian, and before the Mithraism really took off in Rome. So I don't think they probably influenced each other very much, as just a geography and timing matter. And then as far as the writing, because you can read many early Christians what they were writing back and forth to each other, and also what people who hated Christians wrote. You can read Pliny the Younger, for example, about how
Mhm.
he tortured a couple of Christian women to death and what he learned from them. We have his little report about that. Um,
great.
yeah. So you can read both what Christians and their enemies said, and during the period they don't talk about that, right? They do talk about some other things. They even use analogies from history
Mhm.
or from and such. But so I don't think Mithraism had any real impact on Christianity, probably at all, just from the writing. Because I've read a lot of the early fathers.
hmm
Um, again, trying to read as much as I can. In this case, translations of primary sources. The reverse might be true, but I don't know how we would know. Like if Mithraism borrowed stuff from Christianity, that's possible, but we don't have any other writing really, so I don't know how we would
Yeah.
know.
If you know the story, it resembles a little bit. You have the idea of like being born of a virgin, and like this idea of like dying, rebirth, and so on.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's
Yeah,
a
but
couple similar thematic.
that's
Maybe
I
the thing
agree.
of
not only
many.
see not only
That's the
see
thing
Matter.
of
both, but
many
in one.
religions and mystery
Yeah,
schools. It's all death and rebirth.
yeah,
That's
because
basic solar principle.
exactly it's again it's
We're just the harvest.
this idea of a solar archetype. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Or
harvest with the corn king idea or the barley king, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
With the
yeah,
death and rebirth.
exactly.
So that's a pretty common theme you're going to see just in general.
Exactly.
But if we can briefly um, jump jump to the other claim, the Moses one, I think that
Yeah.
one. I mean, I hope I can surprise you a little. Uh, uh, the so I do have a question though, because your original comment, Matt, wasn't quite clear about if you're assuming Moses was made up or was at least partially mythological, right?
Yeah. The idea
What-
is that. Oh, sorry. I thought you were.
What period are you claiming that happened in? Like, when are you saying that that would have occurred?
Moses' story
Or the invention of it?
when it was written, you mean?
Sure. When are you saying that that was? Because you didn't really write that in your post, but clearly you have a belief about that.
Yeah, I have some idea, but again, I don't really attend to specific time sets. It's not necessarily what I'm like more interested
Sure.
in, let's say.
Sure.
So I cannot
then-
give you like a specific date, like that date.
Got
I just
it.
understand just to give you context again. I just understand that the story was embellished. I think that's the word I can use. Well, you have like attributes that you're getting from similar characters and so on to make the story seem greater and seem more powerful than it actually could have been. So all the idea of like opening the sea and so on, and or again all the attributes of being a guy that is bringing up the monotheistic faith, having the 10 Commandments, blah blah blah. Like all the story again. The way I understand the stories, the way to me it makes more sense to read them, is the symbolical way. Is the what's occult in there? What is like the value that is hidden there, not necessarily the historically.
Well, the claim that he's a created character is a historical claim. The esoteric part, or the what does it mean part,
Well,
is a different thing. But he's created. That is saying that it is a fiction. That's what that means.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It could be like, again, it could be that a guy named Moses existed and the story went there and there and so on. But to me, that's not the biggest point. Like, that's not what I necessarily am caring about. But if you get to the esoteric part, you can get even through his name. For example, you have the Moshe, right? If you want to use the vowels, but you have like Mem, He, and Shin, if I'm not mistaken. So the 3 letters, Mem, He, and Shin. I don't remember if it's on that order. But again, using Kabbalah, you can permutate that, and then you have Hashem, which is what the Jews would understand as the powerful one. Even on one of the names of God, you have the Yud He Vav He, but then you have, which is like a contraction, but then you have an expanded one, which is Hashem Forash, if I'm not mistaken, like a bigger name. So it's the name of God you have names of God's name of God of different numbers of letters, basically. And then again, you can see how, just from looking at his name, from the way it's written, you can understand, okay, it could be that the guy named Moses existed, but it's not really the point. Like, there's something deeper in here that is more valuable to understand than if a guy happened or didn't happen. Or
we can jump back to that in a sec if you want, but when it comes to reading a narrative, what you are describing is imposing meaning on the text. When, for example, if you were to read a ballad about a Norse hero, right? And what he did and what trials he went through and so on, that is a narrative. It is saying these events happened. Now, it may not, in the case of the Norse hero, it may not be meant to be literal. Sometimes this is functionally fan fiction about their gods. But there was also some times where they're like going to specific forts, killing particular people, right? Those are saying this happened, right?
There have been Eddas or stories that have later proven to be true. I know that
the ring fort? Yeah.
Or a like specific locations, like a certain well, or I believe that was quite recently that certain locations have indeed proven to exist, and going from there that those events did indeed take place.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. The idea that a guy named Moses, again, the event could have happened, right? The idea here is, again, to me, it's more interesting to see what's behind it, because even you can see similar stories in other places, that then you understand the archetype behind it, and then okay, it happened, it didn't happen, it happened that way, that other way.
But
The
you see,
archetype of the thing is the value.
but you see, what you're describing isn't what's behind it. It's what you're imposing on it. You are adding to the narrative with these secret meanings, when in fact, the people writing, the people conveying the story or the history of a given event are doing just that, and there is no evidence from the period, none, that will show what you're doing now to be valid. This applies both to Norse writings, as well as to Hebrew writings, as well as to Greek. Although the Greeks, I will admit, will play around with numbers a bit more. They were unhealthily fascinated.
Sounds like the Greeks.
But in general, you have to realize that when you make claims to truth, that they should be rooted not in your own preferences or your own desire to impose meaning, but should be rooted in what the people at the time understood, especially when it comes to historical writing. And also, of course, like with Moses specifically, right? So I'm going to make a bold claim.
Oh dear.
But it is backed up by 3 sources, or 2, depending on how you count. Okay. So what I'm going to claim is that the Exodus from Egypt was a real event, and specifically that it took place during the reign of Amenhotep II. There's a couple reasons for this. But the big one, the one that probably you guys will find the most interesting, is because that dating comes from Manetho, who was a historian who had access to some really old Egyptian texts. Manetho's writing we don't have, but we do have a bunch of quotes from it. Manetho, the quotes we have of his, right, form the basis of our understanding of Egyptian history, including the 30 dynasties thing. He's why we think that. So Manetho is a good source in the sense he's, to a large extent, popularly accepted in Egyptology. They'll argue with him about specific things, right?
Mm-hmm.
He says, transliterated into Greek, that the Pharaoh during the Exodus, and he describes that they then left under Moses and went on to found the city of Jerusalem. He's talking about the Israelites. Was named Amenhotep. Now he says this in Greek, so it's transliterated into Greek. But so that's my first piece of evidence that guy, the kind of founder of our understanding of Egyptian history, he says that it did happen, and it happened under that pharaoh. Now the problem is, of course, that the idea of Amenhotep II, third, fourth, Thutmose the third, we're adding those numbers. That's not what they called themselves, right? So it was a pharaoh named Amenhotep. The reason I'm saying it's Amenhotep II and not one of the others is he's about the right time frame to match with the claim in Judges. Specifically, let me check my notes here. Judges 11:26, in which is I think the story of Jephthah, and he is. Basically it says that 300 years before that event is when the Israelites arrived in Canaan, and then you just add 40 years of wandering in the desert and maybe another year or change to account for calendar variance.
So the opinions among biblical scholars are a little divided. A lot will say the 13th century BC. Others will say the 15th century.
Yeah. I can Stein, if you want, I can give you the source for the other as well.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. But the other source is 1 Kings 6:1, which says that a certain number of years before, that it was a certain number of years, 480 if I recall correctly, from the founding of Solomon's temple, was when the Exodus happened. Okay, so the Bible, 2 different authors in this case. Judges is not written by the same guy as 1 Kings. The Bible is claiming a consistent date, give or take a year, right? And it matches what Manetho says. Also, though, the other way to judge it is the other claims that the Bible makes. It claims, right, that Moses was basically in exile by himself for 40 years because he was wanted for murder. And so the Pharaoh, and then a new Pharaoh came to power who just wasn't interested, right? Who didn't care about that. So the predecessor to the Exodus Pharaoh has to be someone who reigned for 40 or more years, right? If the Bible's true.
Sure.
And then secondly, the plague of the firstborn, which is all the firstborn in Egypt die, right? And then the angel of God passes over the Israelites who have painted the lamb's blood over their door frames, right?
Yeah.
That means, again, if the Bible is true, that the successor to the Exodus Pharaoh must not be his firstborn son.
Yeah.
If the Bible is true, if what it's claiming is true, right? Now, Amenhotep II, his predecessor Thutmose III, and his heir Thutmose IV do match these prerequisites. They're at the right time. His son, the son of the Pharaoh of the Exodus, is not his oldest son. His heir is not his oldest son, and his predecessor reigned for more than 40 years. So that's why I'm arguing for the date. Now, the other date, and that would be 15th century, right? 1400s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. The other date you'll find, which you'll see popularized in Charlton Heston's movie 10 Commandments, is Ramses II. That's the other kind of popular one.
Yeah.
And the reason for it is a single reference in the Pentateuch to a city named Ramses. Ramses is the newer name of a city that during the period would have had a name that starts with an H, if I recall correctly. And so something that was...
Hierapolis or something?
Yeah. And so the claim for the later date of the Exodus relates to this kind of aberration of the newer name being in the older text, right? And they're going, well, it must have happened after this name was started. Well, the problem is that the Bible does this kind of frequently. So like when you read about the War of the Five Kings and Abraham pursuing the people who'd taken his nephew captive, if I recall, that was the incident. He goes as far as Dan. Well, Dan, as a city name, didn't come into existence until the Israelites took over.
Yeah.
In fact, later on, if we keep reading, it talks about how the city still in the Pentateuch, how the city name was Dan, but formerly it was like Leah or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they acknowledge, it used to have another name. But in general, the Bible got some copy editing over time. One of the ways you can tell isn't just that. It is, you'll see comments added, probably by Ezra, because he was credited with basically organizing the Hebrew scriptures the way that they are typically presented. So probably Ezra, might have been somebody else, adds comments like, which you can see to this day all over the place. Those weren't original. If you're an eyewitness to an event, you don't also say, which you can see to this day. That's added text. And so it wouldn't be surprising, since they do it at least once with Dan, for them to use the newer name of a city. Just like today, you and I would talk about New York, and we would not call it New Amsterdam.
We should, though.
Yeah, you Dutch.
That was a horrible trait.
But the same is true for like Constantinople. We don't usually call it that today, right?
It's Istanbul.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So this shouldn't shock us that they would do that. But the main argument is focused around that, and then actually using some numerology to reinterpret the 480 years and the 300 years to be symbols of generations, and then changing the numbers. That is the base argument for Ramses.
Yeah, it's the Quranic narrative. The Quran indicates that the
Oh,
same
sure.
pharaoh was in power from Moses' birth until the Exodus, a period that aligns with the 67-year reign of Ramesses II.
Yeah, the Quran is a terrible source of historical information. One of
Yeah,
the ways you
it
can tell
is.
is they think Moses' sister is the same person as Jesus' mother. I'm not kidding. That's in the Quran.
That's highly unlikely.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Because they have similar names,
unless
Miriam
his
and Mary.
unless his mother was like already ancient when she gave birth.
Yeah, no, it's just mistaken. It's because they had similar names, and Muhammad clearly did not know the difference. Um,
Yeah, and the for the Amenhotep, some scholars suggest Amenhotep II as a
yep.
candidate for the pharaoh of the Exodus, citing his proximity to the Israelites in Goshen and the unusual succession to his younger son,
Yes.
Thutmose the Fourth. So younger son probably meaning second, third.
Right.
At
That.
the
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
least,
So
not
that's
at the very least not the first, because then it would have just said his son or
well, right.
first
Well, we
son,
know.
oldest son.
I, Todd, do not recall offhand, but we do know the name of his oldest son. Like he was the crown prince. There are carvings and reliefs talking about him, but that guy died.
Yeah, he went by Pharaoh Thutmose the fourth.
Correct. But that was not obviously originally his heir.
No,
Um,
that was
yeah.
the yeah, no, that's like
Yeah.
his pharaoh name,
Yeah.
the
And
the
so
name
I
that
am
he
agreeing with those scholars, I guess is what I'm saying. And in particular, again, and is because that's what the oldest historical texts that we have say. But the other and also because of the aligning pieces, which is and you guys will probably be fascinated by this. I think Matt, I know you from what you're talking about. You seem to enjoy reading ancient writing.
Hmm.
Yeah. So there is I think it's pronounced, gonna try. It's spelled Merneptah. Merneptah, maybe?
Something.
But
Something like
it's
that.
a, it's a
sound,
stele
sounds
that
like it.
was, so a carving on stone that the Egyptians made somewhere around 1210 BC. Okay? So
Hmm.
here's here's the here's the translation of the end of that. That's the important part for our purposes. The princes are prostrate, saying peace. No one raises his head above the 9 bows. Desolation is for Tejenhu. Hattai is pacified. Plundered is Canaan with every evil. Carried off is Asqualuni. Seized upon is Gezer. Yanoam is made non-existent. Israel is laid waste. Its seed is no more. And we can keep going. The point is, the Egyptians claimed in the 1200s BC that Israel was its own country that they had just defeated in war, which is the
Hmm.
other piece that is why I would say that there is no way it can be Ramses II. It's too late. It doesn't match Egyptians' writing. Um, but as it relates to, did the 10 plagues take place? Well, the Egyptians describe some of them in the Ipwer papyrus. Now, the papyrus itself is not short, particularly. I had a read earlier this week, and
Hmm.
it basically describes social collapse, complete social collapse, in which slave masters are now chained up and forced to row boats, in which previously prosperous people are starving to death, in which slaves have usurped their masters' homes. Um, Mass chaos. That's the general description of what's going on, right? Complete social upheaval. But there are some very interesting quotes. describing what's going on or what caused this social upheaval. The first quote is this, and you guys will probably recognize this if you've read the account of the Exodus. There is blood everywhere. Lo, the river is blood. This is from an Egyptian papyrus. One thirsts for water. They're talking about the Nile being undrinkable
Yeah.
and being blood. That's literally what is being said.
Yeah.
The next one is a description of what's going on with the vegetation. So here's a couple quotes. Lo, the trees are felled, branches stripped. Lo, grain is lacking on all sides. Birds find neither fruit nor herbs. So they're describing mass loss of at least edible vegetation, and of the branches being stripped off the trees. Now, in the biblical account, of course, you have both hail wrecking the trees and a bunch of the crops, and then locusts coming through.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't describing, I freely admit, the locusts or the hail. This description, however, does align with what would have happened, which is mass starvation, including, in this case, of the birds, which is an odd thing to note. The next quote is also quite specific. The land is without light. You may recall the darkness.
Yeah.
The next one is a little more poetic, I think. Groaning is throughout the land, mingled with laments. Lo, many dead are buried in the river. The stream is the grave. The tomb become a stream. And he who puts his brother in the ground is everywhere.
That's mass death. Yeah, probably
That's mass
caused by, well, among other things, by starvation, lack of clean drinking water. I mean, yeah, that shit will kill you quick.
Yeah. And
Well,
and
not
again,
not as quick as you'd like, probably, but still, you know.
and again, if the Bible's true with the death of the firstborn, this then would be literally true. He who puts his brother in the ground is everywhere, because every family would have a dead brother. Or would be dead, because they'd be the only kid.
Yeah, okay.
And then just kind of a general all is ruin. Now, the last one, I didn't want to read the quote because it's kind of confusing. So I just want to explain it. But you can read it. I encourage you to do it. It's pretty cool stuff. Like, it's really clear a disaster had struck. And that these people, when they originally wrote it, are just... Well, their author, I should say, Ipwer, I think is the guy's name. Like, his name's in the papyrus. When he originally wrote it, this was clearly a time of great trouble for Egypt. But the last quote that I wanted to point out basically talks about female slaves wearing gold, silver, bronze, and precious stones. Now, obviously, this could simply be more of the upending of the social order, right? Of people seizing power, this kind of thing. However, this also aligns with what the Bible says happened, which is that the Israelites essentially looted the Egyptians, that the Egyptians were so eager for them to leave that they gave them golden jewelry to go away.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you don't have to agree with me on that, but my point is the idea that the Egyptians, like, there's no evidence at all that they ever talked about the plagues. That's simply not true. They did talk about at least 2 or 3 specifically identifiable ones. And I would argue 4 or 5 in this particular thing. But two I think are pretty clear. The darkness thing I think is quite clear. And the river is blood. Those aren't ambiguous terms.
Mm-hmm. There's a very interesting idea coming from that Egyptian and like Israel connection.
Mm-hmm.
There's from a book, I don't know if you read it before. It's called Berossus in Genesis. It talks about this Manetho guy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Manetho, how do you say it? So it's Berossus in Genesis, Manetho and Exodus, Hellenistic stories, and the date of the Pentateuch. And it's very interesting. It talks about how I think it's called like Hyksos with an I.
Yes. The sea peoples, I think, is another way they're described. Yeah.
Yeah. It talks about that. I'm pretty sure it's around the same time.
Wait. Yeah, give or take a century. Yeah, that's quite. Yeah, that's correct.
It's a very, very interesting read as well. Like 300 something pages only. It's very short.
Yeah. The if I recall correctly, the Hyksos are just before this dynasty. So this would be, we're talking about the 18th dynasty. At least that's what I'm saying, right? Mm-hmm. And so this would have been right before the 18th dynasty would have been the Hyksos. So yeah, not long before at all.
And I want to
3 generations.
Real quick, this is all very, very interesting, and but something that's been said in chat by Milton, Life is a Dream, Death is an Awakening. This is like a book club, right? There is no real evidence of anything, all philosophy and speculation. And I mean, he mentioned it on a like just now on a in a Telegram group that we're both in, that he started, and I was like, let's throw this up in the live chat. Let's discuss this, because there is a lot of evidence from a lot of these things, and Todd, like as you mentioned before, things like papyrus and just texts and
carvings on stone, writing on plaster.
Yeah, and a lot of those things. Time is a cruel mistress when it comes to those things. Texts on stone will fade, buildings will crumble, papyrus doesn't fossilize, that just rots.
Yeah. One of the broader claim. I'm sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Yes, just to give a little bit of context, I wanted to speak this on an earlier occasion, but I think now that you bring it up, it's a nice one as well. So that's to me, one way you can also look at how the knowledge is kept, basically. Again, if you have a way to keep the symbols going, eventually people can decode the symbols again. So one way, for example, is through stories. So you can tell a story, and you keep telling the story until people realize, okay, the teaching of the stories is behind there. Yeah. You have games, like you have card games, dice games, a bunch of things which people used to, like eventually at some point they understood, okay, I can use this as some kind of divination or whatever, but doesn't necessarily has to be done as a divination to it. It just tells you a story. Again, the card told, like, why is it, for example, that many cards and not much more and not much less? Why is it this symbol and not that symbol? And when you reflect on that, you can understand, again, how the knowledge is kept, like games, music, just a bunch of things. So it's something that lives through the culture, even though you may not have something like a paper or whatever, and you may not have someone that heard the stories, as in they heard they had the transmission, the oral transmission. You have someone replaying that teaching most of the times unknowingly, and that's my idea. I was trying to bring with the secret society, is that when you do get the code, when you do get to understand it, it's like, okay, now I see it. Now it makes a lot of sense. When they are making, for example, when you see the tarot cards, for example, okay, some will say, we have one from I think it's like 15th century in Italy or whatever. Sure, but then you go to like older similar card games and you see the same symbology, and even in other cultures, like you see it in India and China, and then you can understand, okay, even though maybe they didn't necessarily connect, as in like not necessarily the Chinese went to India and show, hey, this is how it's done or whatever, there is some underlying again, this idea, this notion of our source, this notion of something that came, that people continue to use, and sometimes it's slightly different, sometimes it's, well, a bit more than different, but you can see the patterns. That's the idea behind it. You can see through the numbers, through the symbols, through the whatever is the foundation of it.
Yeah.
How the knowledge persists, basically.
Now, I am curious, Matt, if you'd be up for it anyway, and maybe Stein would you be because there's a bit about comparative symbolism in different ancient cultures.
Yeah.
In that book I mentioned earlier, which
What was the name again?
The Age of Revelation. It is written by an American, but we're talking Founding Fathers era. He was like the first head of the U.S. Mint. But he was writing a direct response to Thomas Paine's The Age of Reason. And is basically arguing against him. But over the course of the argument, he basically talks about many of the symbols in some of the oldest pagan religions as known at the time. I mean, this book was printed 1801, right? And much of its content, especially in that area, is still true today. The stuff he was talking about is still correct. And I wondered if you guys might be willing to read that and let me know when you'd be up for discussing it, because he's basically making the argument that all ancient religions, or the oldest ones at least that he knew of in his day, which broadly speaking is still correct, there are some other ones that we know of now, that they all show evidence of knowledge of the triune God. He argues not that they knew about one God. He argues that they specifically knew about 3 in 1.
Yeah.
That is a very, very common theme in paganism, and
So I'm wondering if you guys would look at that, especially that chapter, right? I mean, we can talk about the whole thing if you want, but at some point at a later date, set up a time to talk about it, because I found that to be a very fascinating argument.
Sounds interesting to me.
We can definitely do that if you we have this just the small speaking of three trio chat.
Exactly.
On I think the easiest is in the Twitter DMs. If you'll just send the title of the book or the text or whatever.
Yeah, I'll be very much interested.
Yeah,
absolutely.
If you want a quick answer, like I showed really quickly. If you go to the Tree of Life system, you have it here, right? You have the first, let's say, form of energy. So before this, you have more things, but they're formless. It's like the Greek would call the ocean, right? Like the primordial ocean. Then you get into cosmogony. I think the Sumerians would call it Tiamat or whatever. You have this idea, this notion of like an ocean or like this formless. You cannot see this void. This idea of there's no form.
That you're just now they'd use slightly different language. I'm familiar with the Sumerian
but the concept.
In the Germanic mythologies, that would be Genungagap, the void where the two realms came together, and where everything
exactly the idea of
created.
First of all, there's nothing. Let's say that's cosmogony, right? That there's nothing there, and then first emanation, second emanation, third emanation, or from that order, sorry. And then from that, everything else comes. So there is this, like, from here, the Trinity, let's say, comes to be in a lot of systems. You can understand how they correlate.
I see what you're saying. That's not quite what Elias is arguing. Nor is it what I would be saying, of course. But I am curious what you guys would make of his argument. If you guys would like to talk about that at a later date, I think that would be really cool. But the Christian view, right, is that the triune God is there at creation, and if you read it, you'll get that from the text a bit as well. For example, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Right. This is how Genesis begins, and then God basically speaks things into existence. Right. Speaks the various aspects of the world that we see today, the universe we see today, including the lights in the sky.
And then you have similar notions even in the Vedas with the primordial sound, right? You have the Om sound that is the creation of things. It's not one person, let's say one entity saying it, but it's the sound creating this. And again, if we come back to this idea, you have here energy, light, and sound.
the
It
Greeks
sounds
used
crazy,
a
everything.
similar term called the logos for,
Mhm.
yeah, for basically some of their older writing for philosophy, and also talking about the Greeks seem to have had an idea of a supreme god. I don't recall the
Mhm.
name, but I can find it for you. This is something that they basically phased out over time. Like the old further back you go, the less gods the Greeks have.
Yeah,
The Romans
you had
even
that cosmogony as
the
well. Right?
Romans even kind of mocked them about this, by the way, because the Romans were like, "Well, our religion is the pure one because look how many made up gods you have. We have just a few." It was
And
like they
then they
actually
end up
wrote
like
that. They
the,
actually wrote that about the Greeks and specifically accused the Greeks of adding to their religious beliefs with plays. That the Greeks kept adding basically additions to the mythology in plays. And you can read Roman writing basically arguing that they have the real Greek religion and the Greeks are all wrong. And it's very interesting stuff. But the point is, the
Mhm.
further back you go, both in Greek writing and from people who are interacting with them, the less and less gods they have. This is broadly true for Canaanite writing as well,
Mhm.
though their religion is definitely less organized, I would say. Um, but one thing to bear to bear in mind, right? It shouldn't surprise you that some of the earliest writing um, matches what the Bible has to say. One, I believe the Bible to be true, so it shouldn't surprise me if there are some things that are close. But it shouldn't surprise you because Abraham is from Ur of the Chaldeans. Abraham is from Samaria. So when you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh goes and talks to the oldest man he can find after a rather long journey, and that old man tells him about the global flood, about the tree of life, this
Mhm.
actually aligns quite well with scripture. Now, obviously, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, you have polytheism, and Gilgamesh is claiming he, of course, is the son of a god. He is the author. This is and is a king. This is not a big shock, but I do think it's very interesting that Gilgamesh's contemporaries included several people who were involved, according to the Bible, in the War of the Five Kings, which would make Gilgamesh and Abraham contemporaries. They would have been alive at the same time. And
Mhm.
this is further attested in trade records from the city of Elba, who were selling weapons to both sides.
Yeah.
um,
See how story repeats itself.
oh, no, it's the same incident being described by two of them and shown to be at the same time by the other. It's
I
very,
mean, the someone selling weapons to both sides, like
but
then nowadays it has
yeah,
same stuff.
to answer your friend's question, Stein, about physical evidence, right? Can we take one example? Okay. So are you aware of maybe having heard it as children or something? Are you aware of the story of Jericho, the fall of Jericho?
the walls of Jericho. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, of course.
Okay. So if you would like to, I can point you in the direction of a YouTube video to like actually see footage of the area around it, if you want at some point. But the actually, I can tell your audience how to look it up if you want to. This will, of course, be from a Christian perspective. But if you want to see the video, I mean, you can mute it if you want, I guess. There is video of Jericho that you can watch on the YouTube channel Expedition Bible. Uh, and so all you have to do is find the right video, and you'll be able to see him walking around the ruins, and you can actually see video of what the place looks like. And it's important because if you want to know if the text is telling you the truth, when it describes something physically, it should have all the details right. So in the fall of Jericho, it describes, firstly, that the walls collapse, right?
Hmm.
That's the beginning of the fall of Jericho. I mean, they've been marching around and stuff, but you wouldn't expect to find physical evidence of people marching several thousand years ago.
I believe
Collapsed walls.
I believe I've seen the video that you're referencing. I've seen it years ago, but I've seen something like it. There is indeed physical evidence of it.
Yeah, but that's not that's just a detail. So the walls collapse, right? They collapse outward. So the
Hmm.
city of Jericho during this period and still today, where its ruins are, was basically built on on a hill created by a retaining wall. So there's a retaining wall holding up the hill, and then you've got fortifications on top. The fortifications collapsed, the retaining wall didn't. And as a result, you had a ramp of the wall rubble leading up into the city. So when the Bible describes the Israelites attacking, it talks about them going up into the city. This matches the archaeology. Now, by itself, this wouldn't be a big piece of evidence, but then the Bible also says this took place just after harvest. And in the ruins of Jericho, on that layer, you find freshly harvested grain. Further, it says they put the city to the torch, which is exactly what you find. You find a layer of fire destruction. So these are 4 specific ways to go, did this passage tell me the truth? Is what the Bible is saying here, can it be shown to be true? And obviously, you can argue about whether or not God did it and how many times they marched exactly. I think that's largely foolishness. But when it comes to things you can check, physical evidence matches precisely what was said, which lends credence, which makes it look more likely that the rest is also true. I mean, that's one example, but I think a pretty clear one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very well-known story, of course. Even like used to this day. I mean, there's literally a wrestler, Chris Jericho, who his finishing move is the walls of Jericho. So which is it's more like a modified Boston Crab. So I don't know how much it actually has to do with the whole biblical perspective, but still it's made its way into pop culture. It's a very well known story indeed. The blowing of the ram horns, the marching around the city.
Yeah.
If there is a story of the Bible that is not the creation story or the crucifixion or whatever, it's a very, very well known one. And
yeah. And again, it's a thing that you can show physically.
Mm-hmm.
The parts that you'd expect to be able to find are there as described. And this is the case. And I would challenge your audience to look into this if they get the chance. Check, see if the Bible's accurate when it talks about history, because if it is, then you need to take seriously its spiritual claims. There are over 35,000 archaeological digs made directly related to the subject matter of the Bible. Not one of them has proven it false. And in fact,
as there is evidence of a flood, there is, if that was truly, God who freaking flooded the world and got rid of the Nephilim that way, or however it happened.
Now
that may be subjective, but there is physical evidence of around that time. I believe the Younger Dryas. Let's say 14.
It's even worse.
Later.
It's even worse than what you're going to say. I know where you're going to go. You're going to talk about a localized flood. I'm aware of that. However, the evidence is actually stacked a bit higher. Now, if you guys want to, that would probably be a different video. If you want to talk about, because basically every ancient culture, like we've spoken about a bit before, Stein, talked about dragons, talked about giants, and talked about a global flood with very few survivors.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Genetics agrees with this, incidentally. Modern genetics indicate that at some point humanity was down to a single male ancestor generations after we had a single female ancestor, which is to say we were cut down to one family at one point. Modern genetics agrees with this.
Yeah, which is funny because that's it's kind of Adam and Eve. It's kind of the Bok saga, even.
Well, so Adam and Eve isn't shocking. Even if you believed in evolutionary theory, I think you shouldn't. I think there are real reasons not to. I think there are actually quite a lot of reasons not to. But assuming you believed in evolutionary theory, you also would believe in a first couple humans, right? You would believe at some point that humanity evolved and that there would have been a pair to then have more children. This wouldn't
Yeah, I mean
surprise
that's even the case in Germanic mythology. We have Ask and Embla, you know, the first two people cut out of ash tree and a different tree. I don't know from the top of my head, and it was Odin, Wotan himself, who, you know, gave us the gift of life. You know, he breathed air into, well, breathed life into Ask and Embla.
you. Yeah, this matches what it says in the Bible as it
Yeah.
relates to Adam and Eve.
Yeah, and even like for anything to happen, there must be again the one that gives the seed and the one that receives the seed to make it happen, right? To give birth, let's say. That is to, even if you go down to the atomic level, right? You need a polarizing. You need polarizing energies, basically.
You need a catalyst of
Yeah, exactly.
some sort.
And
Exactly.
but the thing that shows that the flood, right, genetically is likely to be true isn't the Adam and Eve idea, isn't the first two humans. It's the bottleneck later. It's the generations later, after there were humans, suddenly we're all descended from one man. Then, not earlier. That's the thing that modern genetics actually is showing, and that lends a great deal of credence to stories of humanity being nearly wiped out and just a small number remaining.
Yeah, there's even, you know, like myself, you know, blue eyes. That's a very recent genetic mutation coming from what is most likely one single individual around the Caspian Sea, I believe,
Oh, that's cool.
or around that area, at least. So everyone who has, you know, blue eyes is from that same genetic line, because
It's
that is
basically
not.
descended from that guy.
Yeah, you know, was one guy, you know, around the, I believe it was around the Caspian Sea. I can be mistaken. You know, he got around, as you know, guys do, and you know, created a whole freaking line of people with blue eyes. But it's a genetic mutation. It's not evolution. Like, it didn't happen just, you know, over time, slowly but surely, brown turned into blue, or, you know, brown turned into white, or, you know, whatever color you think you are. You know, it's mutations. And yeah, of course, that, you know, progresses and becomes, you know, like mutates and mixes. And
Yeah, and then people can argue if that's completely natural, as in someone like evolutionary argument would be, or like, oh, everything is like completely natural, it's just random mutations or whatever. And someone can argue, no, it was completely crafted, let's say, or even the middle way. It was crafted and then now it's mutated. So now you have both. You have someone that first, let's say, even on the name of the first book, right? Genesis. Some esoteric way of reading it is the gene of Isis, for example. You see there's some genetics being taught there. Even from the way, from the histories that talk about the similar thing going on, as in the creation, you see in other places. I remember even I was hearing about a person from my workplace, which was talking about the I don't know if they call it a religion, but basically what they believe down in Madagascar. And they talk similarly about like their gods, which were giants or something that got from the mud and did something and so on. It's an island, middle of nowhere. And they kind of got to the similar, like a kind of similar ideas. And then you have this again, this idea of someone, let's say, programming that, someone changing it. So not necessarily 100% natural, or like random occasion, random atoms just merge together, and now you have humans, and now they think. It's like, well, that's a silly way of thinking, honestly. But then you can go also the totally other way, which is no, it was completely totally crafted and so on and so on.
With the breath of
And
life.
it's very interesting to.
so, little correction on my part of the origin of the blue eyes. It's not the Caspian Sea; it's the Black Sea.
Those are next to each other. Okay, sure. Those are actually
the northwest region of the Black Sea. I don't want to
Fair
Like
enough.
I've had a video taken down for misinformation already. So
Oh.
like,
Oh, I see.
I don't just
You and your health.
I just say it's a parody. Yeah. Then it's fine.
But
in Minecraft, yeah.
yeah, but the main thing with the flood, right? Like broadly speaking, the thing I would want to talk with you about is the geological evidence for it. Actually, there's excellent evidence, and the short version is the entire planet, basically, and especially the tops of mountains, other than brand new ones, volcanoes, is covered in sedimentary rock, which is a problem because sediment flows downhill. If there was never a global flood, how exactly are the tops of mountains covered in sediment that turned to rock under pressure?
Must have flowed up for
That's not
some.
how dirt flows.
Says you.
Now, there are arguments to try to explain it, but they do have weaknesses, and that would take a while to get into. But that's the short version. The short version is that's a problem.
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely a bit of a problem, and would indicate that the tops of those mountains aren't even the tops of those mountains, because then there wouldn't be sediment there. So some part just got cut off or eroded off, which water does very well.
Yeah,
Over
or
very long
dirt got
periods of time.
deposited on them under pressure, creating sedimentary rock.
That could also happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and is what you'll see with like localized floods. You'll see rapid burial of stuff lower down, right? And then if you so it wouldn't be a shock for this to happen, other than just that it appears to have been global.
Yeah.
That would be the surprise. But as
I
far
mean,
as
we have global stories of a mud flood, for example. A lot that's kind of going into the whole Tartaria thing. I always manage to get everything back to Tartaria. It's a special skill of mine. But no, I mean those things like that also happen worldwide. A lot of things are buried quite deep. Like even here in the Netherlands, in the city of Groningen. At the Grote Markt, the major square, they did some renovations there, and they found what is pretty much a city beneath the city. So sediments over the thousands of years, hundreds of years have been has been deposited on top of it, and so there must have been something.
And not only that, you have plenty of stories of underworlds. So let's say you have the idea of Earth, heavens. So let's say cities above us, we can call it that way, and you have about cities under us, as in literally an underworld. Like people, for example, if you go to tribes in the Amazon, they'll speak about certain even sometimes ant people, they'll call it, or whatever, that come from the underworld and so on, from literally the subterranean, right, under the earth, or from caves.
Yeah,
from
under
the deep sea,
earth, the mountains. We call them in Europe. We call them the dwarves, for example.
Yeah. So you have plenty of
and
let's say corroborating. Right?
If you take that a little further into more conspiratorial territory, you got the Hollow Earth theory.
Though don't go that far. That one at least is provably wrong.
I'm just saying there are a whole lot of different theories that you can speculate on, and a whole lot of physical evidence as well, or at least remnants that prove that stuff happens.
One of the other interesting problems or challenges that I think is pretty easy to picture about the notion, as we're on this sidetrack for a moment, of evolutionary theory, right, is so it takes, if evolution were true, millions or billions of years, right, or hundreds of millions of years to develop certain mutations to adapt to new environments and stuff. It's not usually tomorrow. It's not next gen everything is working. It's a slow development process. So one of the challenges is there are creatures that are uniquely adapted to live based on the world's tides, the ocean tides, right? The problem is the moon, The moon has only about 3 or 4 inches of dust on it, and it is evenly coating the surface, which is to say, with the exception of like a recent impact crater, it's equally distributed. Okay, on all sides. So the reason this is a problem is that space is not actually empty. Space is mostly empty, and any large gravitational body without an atmosphere will slowly accumulate dust. This is a known phenomenon and has a predictable rate, at least in our solar system. We obviously can't know outside of it because we haven't been there. But within our solar system, there's a predictable rate at which you'll accumulate dust that we've been measuring since like the 1960s. So the problem is this: the moon's dust is under 10,000 years worth of dust, which means one of two things. Either the moon is fairly new, in which case you can't explain all the tidal creatures, or something knocked the dust off the moon, or lastly, evolution isn't correct. I'd argue evolution isn't correct. Modern evolutionists will argue something knocked the dust off the moon. The problem is, that the moon is a sphere, and most of their arguments ignore that, which is magical.
But something knocked the dust off the moon like to evenly. Like
yeah, see, that's the problem.
Yeah. About the first argument, though, there are a lot of esoteric stories which will go that route, as in the moon is actually like crafted. It's not a natural thing. Let's say.
Yeah,
it's a crafted body.
The moon is, placed in our orbits. The moon rings hollow like a bell. Those kind of things.
You have different. Yeah. Some will say no, it was like people that were here and went there, or some that went from outside of the thing, and so. But then it's like at that point again, that's to me where it can be cool to read the story as a story, kind of as you would read, let's say, even a comic book or whatever, right? Like a literal story, or you can try to understand what can actually be said about such a thing, and to see if it brings value to you or not. When we were talking about, for example, the underworld, where you have many cultures again talking about this notion that there's a place heavier, let's say, than Earth, or a place much under and deeper and harder to access. If you look into your body or your psychology, you have what people can call the unconscious. That could be your cave, that where you go, where like secrets are hidden, where things are, and so on. Like you go back to the conscious part, that would be the heavens and so on. Like you can get these sort of these sort of understandings about your body, which will bring more.
So heaven and hell are states. Heaven and hell are states of mind. You mean
you can say that. That's one thing, but I'm saying more about the how your body operates. As in, you have the conscious part where, like right now, we are conscious, right? Or at least we think we are. Like we are awake, we're doing something. But there are things that run. Like for example, I'm not controlling my heartbeat. That's unconscious behavior, right? It's just happening, and so on. So you can.
Right back, guys. I apparently need to get my door.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sure.
So basically,
we'll continue this for the moment.
But basically, what I'm saying is like you can make correlations between histories and symbols in your body and in your surroundings. Really, you can understand how things may appear on the conscious part, like as in I can see what you're doing right now, Stein, but there are things running behind you that I cannot, right? And those are let's say hidden. Those are again the caves, the underworld that I cannot see. Your private life, for example.
Sure.
And then again, it's always this play of you can take information for the entertainment of information, as in, oh, I like it, okay, it's cool, or for the value of it, as in, how can I use it? How can this help me somehow? And you play this game basically.
That's why I kind of, like when I mention all those theories, that's why I kind of laugh about it, because they're interesting, notions to think about. It's fun to speculate on, like, ooh, what is it really? Oh, we don't know. Like, have we actually been to the moon? Ooh,
Yeah, instead of being rigid and
so. Yeah. But I think it's important, right, to differentiate speculation or fantasy from reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and the
Yeah, but
and this specific issue, right, with the moon, I think is good evidence for it having been created by God as described in the Bible. I do. Because it does have the right amount of dust for that, actually. That the timing works just fine.
Yeah.
It isn't a
and
like
exactly, and then that's the thing. Some people will argue, yeah, it was that God, the same God in the Bible they created. Some others will say, no, it was actually these other guys which had a much higher technology, therefore they were the gods at the time. Whatever. So that's the thing. I completely
aliens.
go exactly aliens or whatever, right? You can go whatever route you want.
from the Beru, preferably.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever. That's the thing. The stories really, to me, it's like it's cool, it's fun. But when you go deeper into, like you asked, reality, right? What is it really? Because we as humans we have one point of view, but then other beings even who have different points of view, and for them their reality will be totally different. Like imagine being an ant. It's what the fuck? It's gonna be a completely different thing, you know. Or imagine being like a whale. Again, it's gonna be a completely different thing. So we can do as much as we can with our understanding of reality to understand more, right? And then we find the tools. Like some people will go into science and think that's it, that's all it. Some other people go to their religious practices. Some other people will not think about nothing at all, I guess. There are some people like that.
I mean, there are plenty of people, you know, and inside their hat it's just, you know, the monkey with the two symbols. She's
yeah, exactly. So it is very interesting to try and go different routes to find that. I think that, and then we can agree to disagree on how it is, because again, at the end of the day, I have my point of view. Todd will have his. Time will have his. The people listening right now will have theirs, and we can agree a lot of the times, right? We can find like similar. Oh yeah, you thought of this. I thought of that as well, and so on and so on. But at the end of the day, it's your point of view, right? I think if you live true to that point of view, you can have a much better experience than just, you know, let me accept everything that people say to me. Because who knows? Maybe the other guy point of view won't work for you, and then you're just accepting it, right?
Yeah.
Now, let me see if I can do this. Share screen.
You should be able to.
There you go.
Yeah.
If you can show that. That's the book I was hoping to talk with you guys about on another
nice.
Okay.
And you can tell it's a real old book because it's got 2 titles.
Yeah. That's how you know it's legit.
Yeah. Published in 1801, written a little bit before that, though. And obviously, this particular paperback is 2018, but that's not the actual publication date of the original.
It's not. Damn. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. I can give it a read.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I will. I'll get a copy. I mean, shipping here would probably take a little longer, but I'll. No, I don't want a summary. I want to buy the actual book. You know, I like collecting books.
I completely agree. This one I do have a copy of behind me. Different printing though. I have a hardcover, but
nice.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I think on my computer a PDF will appear magically that has that book. Not sure if.
Oh yes, it is. You can read it for free from the Canadian Royal Library. Like the book itself isn't under copyright. The guy's quite dead. This edition might be
Internet Archive,
but
yeah, no,
just the Internet Archive. It's bound to have a copy, but I wanna buy the actual book. I like that much better than just a PDF copy.
I agree, but I think again this is showing a generational difference, Stein.
Yeah. Unfortunately, so.
The young guy here doesn't need the book. It's just us.
It's us old folk.
I mean, I'm not home here, so you cannot see my books, but like I have a couple. Okay, It's just that I wouldn't buy all of them because it's much easier to find a PDF.
But that being said, I would love to talk to you guys about that on another occasion. I think that would be good. I hope I've done a decent job of kind of explaining and engaging with your original claims.
Yeah.
I think on the whole, the Hebrew thing, you agree that you were probably not accurately representing it, but were really more pushing for interaction.
Exactly. Yeah. That was the main idea.
You can.
But I think it's
you can
when you talk about
screen
history.
share.
Sorry, go ahead.
You can stop the screen share. By the way,
yeah,
I can do that for you.
That's yes. But I think when you talk about history, as much as possible, it's important to tell the truth, and a lot of times the truth will get people to interact with you just fine, especially if you point out things that are not popular or are not being taught. Like my talk with Raven about the Black Death, he didn't know that there were 3 major sections of outbreaks. He didn't know about the people like screaming through the streets the first time around. That and the how you can tell how it was being spread, like that just isn't taught in school. And you can really get, I think, quite a lot of people going, oh, if you present things that get lost or left out of their education.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on my Twitter, I mainly talk about, again, usually the symbolic points of view. It's just that sometimes that's the algorithms, right? You need some kind of controversy to stir things up. But it is interesting. I remember once, I think I went to the guy's post at that time. Like he said something, and I went to his post. And the end of the interaction, we were actually in good terms. Because to be honest, I don't hold grudges in Twitter. I know most people. It's whatever. It's not like I'm personally taking things there. But I do agree with you. Like, again, the truth will be based on your point of view at the end of the day. I think like we can agree that there's some let's say shared truth, but from my understanding, that this shared truth will only come from the sum of all points of view. Like I cannot say to you, here's everything, and then like that's my point of view. Again, that's my point of view. Yeah, and then you're gonna say no. I think that's the truth.
I don't think you really believe that. And the way I would demonstrate that is 2 ways. One's pretty simple, which is math, basic math. I don't think that you probably are really making the argument that like 2 + 2 = whatever number we happen to all feel like. The words can change, of course.
Well, it does.
Language, but
it will depend on the.
There is an
it will
amount.
Depend on the.
It does in 2025.
Aside from your feelings.
No, but hey, it does in 2025. Feelings are facts. Okay.
Yeah,
but the second. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But that's again, that depends on the how you're using the numbers actually. Because if you're talking arithmetics, sure. If you're using base 10 arithmetics, sure, then 1 + 1 will always be 2.
Same is true in base 12.
1 + 1 is always going to be true, right? In base 10. But then if you go to base 2, then 1 + 1 is not 2 anymore because there's no 2. It's going to be 10. Or like 1 and 0, right?
That's a way 10. Right. That's a way of notation. That is not correct.
Yeah, but then again, and then you can understand it as, again, symbolically. That's the thing. You have rational things, sure, but you also have symbological things like symbols, and then and that's it. Yeah, all the numbers and language and everything we're doing, it's at the end of the day, it's symbolic. Like for example, if I have Stein and a woman, they'll make a child. So 1 + 1 in this case made a third thing. They make a second thing.
Well, 1 + 1 still in that case equals 1.
Although in that case,
1 + 1 in that case equals a third thing. That's what I'm saying. Again, you play around with the symbols.
2 in my case, but that's 1 + 1, and then like 1 + 1 again equals 1 + 1 is
because even with the story, just to finish the points, right? Even with the story, for example, you're going to be getting the point of view from one specific group, right? From certain people. You're not getting the point of view from everyone. If I tell you, let's say this debate it's over, and then I go to the kitchen and then I say to everyone, yeah, I ended everything in the debate and so on. That's gonna be my point of view, and not if people are not gonna listen to you to see.
Matt,
so then it's
you can't
know what I mean?
always you can't always separate the esoteric from the exoteric. You can't always
they're the sum. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. And just because, it is a certain amount of people writing about it, it doesn't make it less true. And just because it's historical people who have written about it, and we translated it into, modern day English, modern day Dutch, modern day, German, French, like
that's my point. The sum of them will be the truth, not just one point of view. The sum of the point of views. Like, you're not getting just the Bible, for example, from the people that wrote it, but you're also going to other cultures to see, okay, were other cultures talking about similar things? And if so, okay, it makes more sense than if it was just one person talking about it.
So that's so you're kind of skipping around, actually. What I was talking about is that mathematics is true whether or not you like it or whether or not I like it. And the same is true of morality. And the way I would show it to you in person is illegal. But I suspect you would suddenly find a great deal of morality, objective morality, right? If I took your wallet and left with it, I suspect you would be upset with me and would expect me to know better, and to take your wallet. That I also agree, that you would expect me to agree that theft is not good, or that murder is not good, for example.
I do agree that it may not have you the best feeling, but on the grand scheme of things, you never know how things may work out. I personally, for example, was assaulted at gunpoint in Brazil one time, and I think that was one of the best things that happened to me, because it made me take decisions afterwards.
Yeah,
and if that didn't happen, it wouldn't help me in the course of actions that I wanted.
That's
so
when you take it from the objective to the personal. That's
But again, if we're talking about morality.
No, but objectively speaking, being threatened under, on or at gunpoint, sorry, English, is a bad thing. Just
No.
The overall thing itself, on itself, aside from everything else that happened after it, the thing itself is a bad thing.
Yeah.
But again, that's our moral judgment.
The result of it, turned out differently. It turned into lessons. It made you who you are today. But that doesn't mean that, if I were to be held at gunpoint, that it makes it a good thing because you became a better person for it.
Yeah, I'm not arguing it's good. It's neither good or bad. We are the ones putting the morality under it. And when a lion goes and kills a deer, is it like a good lion, a bad lion? It's just doing something.
It's a
right?
lion.
We can say
it's a lion doing lion things.
Exactly, and we can say.
But who are we to judge about whatever the fuck someone else does, or whatever a lion does? Yeah. A lion does lion things. It's animal kingdom, human kingdoms.
But that's again, to me, I don't see the difference. That's the thing. I don't see the morality. I understand that we can argue something, otherwise it's totally chaos, right? If I don't argue that, we don't agree that, okay, let's not steal each other. Maybe it makes no sense. Then society cannot happen. I understand that, but again, that's just our ways of seeing things.
Yeah, okay, but because then, like your example, which is a horrific example.
It's neither good or bad. It's neither. To my point of view, it's neither. That's the thing. It's non-dualistic.
But that's your personal point of view.
That was Todd was trying to say, that I wasn't like, I actually wasn't. Let's say I didn't have this point of view. Or was it
objectively speaking, it's a bad thing just for you, which is another layer, another layer below. It's when we go from the grand to the personal.
But that's the thing. It's objectively from your guys' point of view. Again, there's no sexual,
and it would still be objectively wrong.
not necessarily. That's the thing.
The outcome may be different for everyone else. For you, it turns you into who you are, unfortunately.
So
no, just kidding.
so
Well,
that's an
that
interesting
doesn't
thing.
make the thing a good thing just because it worked.
I didn't claim
out
that.
It,
I didn't claim that it is good. It's
you
neither.
did.
I
Yes.
claim
did
it did a good thing,
by-
but the action itself, it's neither.
So
That's the point.
so
We define what is good, what is bad. For example, even in some cultures, their gods are going to be the demons of others, and vice versa, because obviously their gods is helping them, and
Yeah, okay, but
they're fucking with the others. So for the others, is the demons.
but we
So you
have
understand
some
how morality in that case would be
but we have some ground rules. Like
we can come
religion,
to
texts, whatever aside, we have some ground rules as humans, and one of the ground rules is that, well, let's say unnecessary violence, and whenever it's necessary, that is subjective. Let's say self-defense, then it's fucking necessary. If you were held on gunpoint and you shot the motherfucker first, good on you. That's a good thing because you got threatened. You were done a bad thing, so you, whatever. But the ground rule basically is don't be evil to each other.
I agree.
Be a
But
good
then
person. So then, how is doing such a heinous thing? How is it something in the middle?
again, because the what is evil and good depends on the culture. For let's say it completely depends. It completely depends.
Hold on.
It depends.
Hold
Some
on.
cultures believe, and I'm not gonna name names here, but some cultures believe that certain specific people should die. Now,
Well,
is that evil or not evil?
That's a very
For them, not.
That's a
Hold
very
on.
dangerous
Understand what I'm saying?
overgeneralization. By the way, that is
There is one. Let's pick an example from history. So there was a certain German culture in World War II, and
Yep.
they had several groups of people that they didn't think should be around anymore.
Exactly.
Now,
but that wasn't
what
the
you-
entirety of Germany. That wasn't
What?
all the German people.
Hold on. What you
Okay.
appear to
There
be
was a
claiming-
specific group.
Oh,
Yeah.
just wait a sec, guys. What you appear to be claiming, just to clarify, Matt, is that was fine for them because it was their culture. And
No.
further, what Stein and I would be claiming is that was objectively wrong, despite what their culture may have thought.
No, my point is not that, again, someone is right or wrong. That's our conception.
But
You cannot know.
No.
That's the point. For example, if lightning strikes right here, right now, is it good or bad? It's neither. Lightning strike, like
That's
the
not a moral
lightning
act.
came.
that
But that's what I'm saying. I'm
that
expanding.
really
I'm
depends on the
expanding.
outcome.
I'm expanding the topic to the idea that from your point of view, you are going to have moral ideas. But that's, again, your point of view. There's no objective. We can agree, and largely
there
people
is.
will agree. Okay, it was maybe not so good. But then some other people will say, no, it was actually great because from my point of view, I wanted that to happen. And then how can you argue with that? Then you have two different point of view. Then again, you came into duality. What I'm saying is, when you come back, there's
But
no.
that's
there's no
going
difference.
back to the ground rules, which basically says, be good. Don't do
again-
bad shit to each other.
But again, that's one way of saying, okay, if I can come to you and say, what is good then? For some people, good is going to be something.
Okay,
for other
so-
people, good is going to be another thing.
Fine, let's
And-
say I am some sort of computer fucking genius. Not that I am, and I managed to plunder your entire bank account because I need the money. It's good for me, but bad for you. Does that
For your point of view, is going to be good. Yeah. From mine, it could be
yeah?
bad, but
But
not necessarily.
I still did a bad thing. I fucking stole from you.
Again, from a lot of people morals, and I'm not disagreeing. I'm not saying it's not bad, but the
Yeah,
notion
but
of bad and good.
Yes,
but the
you
notion
are.
of bad and
That
good
is
depends.
exactly what you're saying. That is
Not-
exactly
that's
what you're
not-
saying. You're
that's
saying
not what I'm
because
saying.
it's a good thing for me, it makes it
That's not
neutral,
what I'm saying.
or it makes it
Basically-
a good thing.
Basically, let's use a symbol to help. Okay, when we come here, now we have good, right hand, and bad, left hand. Let's call it this way. It's one way of describing it. But at the end, you have neither. Like at the source of everything, there's no bad and good. There's no.
Yes,
again,
there is.
It's
There
all
is.
from our perspective. It's from our
No.
personal perspective.
May I
Because again-
attempt
Go on.
to explain, and Stein, because I suspect you and I were raised with by somewhat similar parents in some respects. May I attempt to explain our point of view? Now, other than, obviously, Stein won't agree with me on the source. So my belief, of course, on the source is that morality is something established by God, that humans, by and large, actually already know to some extent. But ignoring that for a moment, okay, the difference, or a way to tell if something is good or evil, is whether or not it can exist on its own. Namely, you can have good sex between, say, a man and his wife to produce children, right? It can stand on its own. It can exist in a world without rape. But the reverse is not true. The same is true of theft. You can have property ownership without theft. But you cannot have theft without... Theft is dependent on property ownership. That evil by nature, in almost all cases, you will find is derivative and dependent on something that is alone capable of existing and is good.
Sure.
Just
again,
to verify
that's
before
your...
you respond, hold on. Does that sound right to you, Stein?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And again, I understand, but that's your point of view. Because depending on the culture, and depending on, not even the culture, depending on who is doing the action. Like we just said, okay, if it's a lion killing, then it's not good or bad. Yeah, sure. But it's the same for humans. It will depend on your culture. Sure. And
No.
I'm happy that most people nowadays agree that, okay, let's not kill, let's not rob, and so on and so on. I'm very happy about it.
No,
very happy about it. But that's only because of our current culture.
No, that has nothing to do with culture. That has to do with being a human being. That is ingrained in our very being.
In our nature.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I could argue that most people
are arguing.
I'm arguing that most people, or a lot of people, should be inclined towards maintaining order. Let's call it this way: maintaining order, maintaining things the way they are, instead of creating chaos, instead of killing each other and robbing, and so on and so forth.
Why?
Yeah, okay.
But that's the thing. If we go, well, even nowadays we have people doing things that are not necessarily moral. Do you think they first in their heads they know, I'm such an evil guy, I'm gonna do evil things, and so
yes.
on. Or they think,
absolutely. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. It's a choice.
Not necessarily.
It's a choice that they make.
It is.
Not necessarily.
It literally goes against human nature, so it is a very deliberate action.
And you can tell, and the way you can tell is that when you confront someone, and I did this regularly, I think you guys know this, I did security for about 17 years. So I regularly confronted people who were doing something illegal. Often immoral also, though those aren't necessarily aligned.
No. Exactly.
And the response almost invariably, other than sometimes running, was an excuse. It wasn't a disagreement about what they were doing was wrong. The person didn't go, well, to hell with your standards. No. They would go, well, it was okay this time because there was no one at the front desk, so therefore I could just take the beer.
I work security too. This is very much, it's like not arguing against like your argument. It's like arguing of why it is the right thing to do. Therefore, making it the wrong thing to do. Because if it was the right thing to do, there was no argument.
Right, and they show
you wouldn't have stopped them, or prevented them from doing that same thing. And that is not a subjective thing. That is not a personal thing. It's not because you think it's bad. Like I think a lot of things are bad, but you two might think that some of those things are good. Doesn't make it.
And again, we come back to that idea. You just proved my point. I'll think some things are bad. You're gonna think some other things are bad, and so on and so forth. We can say that there are some general things which, sure, a lot of people agree that are bad, but some people are not necessarily agreeing because they'll just keep doing it.
But those are the outliers. And if you have to make an excuse, if you have to try and explain the thing that you are doing, then why are you doing it? If you're for example, I have worked in nightclubs, and like Dutch techno parties, Dutch EDM parties, ecstasy will be used. We know it is. It's just a matter of don't let us see you use it. Okay, we know you have it. Just don't let us see it. But they're whether it be to to me or local authorities or whoever, they're going to try and explain and make it right why they are using it, why they have too much on them. If it's one pill, sure. If it's two pills, it's a bit too much. But if you have like 6, 7 pills or whatever on you, we're going to have to call local authorities because we are going to have to assume that you're selling them. And they're going to have to try and explain, because it is it is a bad thing that they are doing. A lot of us can agree on that. They're going to have to try and explain why it isn't a bad thing that they are doing.
Maybe a simpler example would be a thief stealing some food who argues that it was okay this time because he was hungry. That's a pretty simple example. But as soon as he says that, what he's actually saying is, I agree there is a standard, which is that theft is wrong. I'm arguing that it's just okay this time because of these excuses. They show by giving an excuse that they agree with the standard and expect you to as well. Otherwise, the thing they said would be nonsense. They would just be speaking gibberish. It is only useful things. An excuse is only useful in that there is a standard. And you will see this in daily life. You probably do it in daily life. I'm certain that that virtually every human does. That when you do something that you yourself actually acknowledge is not the right thing to do at a given moment, that you will make an excuse for you.
Yeah. And that has nothing to do with religion, spirituality,
but
power.
It comes back to the idea of, again, the point of view. That's where we began, right?
It
was actually the beginning.
It is human nature. It is ingrained in our nature. It is ingrained in our very being. That has nothing to do with the point of view. It's not a personal thing.
Let's come back to the beginning of the argument, which was, I was saying, from my point of view, the truth is going to be the sum of point of views. And then Todd was saying, no, I actually argue you don't believe that. And then we started talking about the math, as in like 1 + 1 and so on.
Yeah,
so that's the initial of the argument.
Okay, cool.
So what I'm saying about the good and bad is, again, dependent on the point of view of whoever is acting.
So
something can be good or bad depending on that. I'm not saying let's break. Just to finish the argument, I'm not saying let's strip everything and no, murder is actually good and rum is actually it's actually good and so on and so on. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, okay, we as humans in a culture agreed that those are the terms. Sure, I completely agree with that.
But
not necessarily all points of view who agree with that. Just like, again, you have in nature.
Then let's kind of go back to the point that Milton, life is a dream, death is an awakening, was trying to make. That like, just because, and there have been several world leaders who said this, including Funny Mustache Man, that if you tell a lie long enough, then people will start believing it. Doesn't make it less of a lie. And if you say that, you'll believe things for a fact if multiple sources back it up, cool. I can get a group of friends right now. We can make up a story, and we can, tell each other that we're going to tell this story for the rest of our fucking lives. And we believe that it happened. Like, we genuinely believe that it happened. You can put us on any kind of fucking lie detector. It will not go off. But it never happened. But we all say it happened. We all believe it happened, but it never actually happened. There is no physical proof. There is no record of it. We just made it up. But we're all saying it. So in your argument, with your definition, then would be, that's the truth because multiple sources are backing it up.
And you all
are people
saying
going
the
to
same thing for several years, several generations, if we're really trying, even though it never happened. But because so many people tell it, it must be the truth.
If people start taking actions and start to shape their lives upon that, it does become a truth. It does become something that even though there was no basis,
But it never
it
happened.
just happened. Okay,
It
but
is-
that's
then-
the thing. You made it into existence,
Then
and
their
there's a lot of
truth-
stories which, and there's a lot
But
of
then
stories
their
which work
truth
like that.
is still a lie because it never happened. It may be their truth, sure, but it's still a lie. It is
But
based
that's-
upon a lie. It is their truth based upon a lie, provably because there is no proof because it never happened. We made that shit up.
Yes.
But let's get an easier example, right? You're talking about, like, let's say, let's get some people and let's craft a story and so on. You don't need to do that. You as a person, you have memories, right, of the past. I assume you have memories of childhood and so on and so on.
Yeah, sure.
You have memories of things from your point of view, and you believe that to be true. But then other people living around that same time will have another point of view of the same thing that happened. Does your point of view is not the truth and only theirs, or is only yours point of view true, and so on? Because, for example, you can have an experience, let's say with a parent or a brother and whatever, and you can see from your point of view, oh, he was being mean to me and he was, doing bad things and so on. Whereas from his point of view, he's going to say, no, I was trying to do my best. I don't know, it came that way and so on.
So,
But now you see that there's a polarizing thing. There's two points of view, two different points of view.
No.
Who is the truth one?
No, you're wrong. And you're talking to the wrong audience here, because we both work security. What happened? What was on the camera? That's what happened. It doesn't matter what the witnesses said. We can check what happened and review it with everyone. There is objective truth that is not, in fact, your feelings or his feelings. It is true whether or not you like it.
Sure, that's part of the truth. Part of your observation is also the truth, because if you're going to take actions upon that, then it changes your reality. If you see an action and you think, for example, that someone is being mean to you, you're going to take actions based on that. And if you thought otherwise, if you thought, no, they were actually being good to me, you're going to take actions otherwise. So even though I agree with you, there's objective truth. Someone may have sent you a bad message or whatever. They slurred or whatever. Okay, that happened. That is objective truth. And I agree with you guys. Objective truth exists, right? I can punch my face. It exists. But there's more to that. And that's what I'm saying. The sum of all the points of view plus the objective truth will be the total truth. Because even some things we cannot get the objective truth of anymore, because we just have points of view of people. That was my first argument. Like, some stories we just have points of view.
Bro, as Todd said, you're talking to security guards. You're talking to people who, for their living, need proof.
Yeah.
Like actual, tangible, physical proof.
Yes.
So, I've worked mall security before. It's a lazy fucking job. Just do your round every now and then, and you'll be good. Don't bother too much. If I see someone on the security cam stealing, one of my first fucking days actually, somebody stole a bottle of perfume. In that situation, we never managed to catch that person. But say, I caught them. And, it is on the security footage. I can see on the security footage from that store, because most of them have their own security footage, their own CCTV. I can see that person stole a perfume bottle. I am allowed to search him at that point. I find the perfume bottle. Theft is immoral, illegal, doesn't fucking matter. But if that person said to me, like, their truth is, oh, but I didn't have any money, and I don't know, like, fucking Valentine's Day is coming up, and I wanted to get something nice for my girlfriend. Does that make it right? He's coming with a good argument. I feel that I'm broke as fuck too.
Again, it depends on what you do. What you do with that information. It's not right or wrong. It depends on what you do. He did something.
Go to the police because he fucking stole something.
That's one way of acting. And I'm not saying don't do it. For sure. If you want to do it, go do it. I'm not saying don't do it. But that's your point of view.
Bad thing.
Again, it's an objective bad thing from your point of view of how bad it is.
There's a confusion of terms. So, Matt, you are mostly arguing from a personal morality rather than objective morality point of view, mostly. You're mostly also arguing from a personal reality point of view, to an extent, though you agree objective reality also exists. That is
those are true.
that yeah. So that's what you're saying, and Stein and I appear to be arguing from a objective truth and objective morality point of view, which is to say, morality is true whether or not I agree with it, even at a given moment. Even if I feel like stealing a thing, that doesn't make it right. That I'm being judged from above, or that's not my. I don't have the right to decide morality. It's not. I'm not the source. And so the problem is, or the way that you betray that you kind of do agree with us actually, is by making the claim that your personal view of subjective truth is correct. You are making an objective claim. You are claiming.
Yeah, both are true. That's what I'm saying.
You are sawing at the branch on which you sit.
You're
telling us
not
that
denying
what
that
your perspective is true, and that we should believe you. But that only works if there's objective truth.
No, you can believe whatever you want. You can, and again, and most of the points, I'm not even disagreeing with you. I do agree with you. Don't rob, don't kill others, and so on and so on. My main point is that, again, there's what you can call an objective part of life, but there is the subjective, and again, your mind is malleable. Your memories and everything, it's not objective. You cannot get reminded of something in objective terms. It's all malleable. Every time you remember something, you are basically changing that memory. Even your synapses are changing a little bit. You're like imprinting your current emotional state on that memory. So there's, at some point, there is the most, let's say, malleable things in life, and the most physical, let's call it, the most like hard to change. And
how did this turn into a biology class?
I'm just giving an example. There are things which are not, you cannot point, you cannot like grab, right? Even in physics, at some point you go deep enough, you cannot really understand what's going on there. You cannot say where the quark is, where the quantum stuff are. It's just like you have a probability. I'm just giving you other examples so you understand the idea.
You're talking about imperfect knowledge. Which is
there
a
is
different thing.
There is the concept. There is the idea of, okay, we can all agree that there's and that was my main point, right? That if we sum up all the personal point of views, not only from humans but from everything really in reality, we'll come up to what is
points of view.
Well, you can, first of all, you can ask them, right? Just like you guys are saying to me your points of view, and I'm understanding that. Or you can try to
ones,
well, you can try to meditate on them. You can try to understand how they be. It's gonna be a very interesting experience. Just try to do it.
That's not how to get information.
No, sorry. If there is literal evidence for things, whether they be physical, as in the walls of Jericho example. No, bro.
Go on.
Interrupt me one more time.
Go on, sir. Go on.
It's my. Okay. There is, for some things, there is physical proof, such as the walls of Jericho example that he gave. Yes, some of the stories, recountings, may not be entirely true, or may have entirely happened as they said happened, but it doesn't make them true or false. And like kind of going back to what I said earlier, I can get a group of friends and make shit up as I go. For other people, that may become their truth, but it's still based upon a lie. So if the overarching thing is it's good or it's bad, which is human nature. Again, two security guards, as we said, if you catch someone, you're gonna make an excuse why it is right that they are doing this, which proves that they know it's wrong.
Yep.
It may be right for them. Yeah, that may be their truth, but that doesn't make it actually right. Or the funny mustache guy, he did a whole lot of bad fucking things. He thought it was the right thing to do. Does that actually make it the right thing to do because several people agreed with him. Several, big brain people
No, and that's
agreed with him that it was the right thing to do. No, but his personal view was this is right, so therefore it is right. That's what you're arguing.
for him. Again, we are making a confusion here from that there is a supreme thing that everybody should follow, and
it's called human nature.
Again, we can agree to disagree on this, and we are gonna go circular, right? Because what I'm saying is that the sum of all the points of view will make that supreme point of view. That's the point. Like if again, most people believe let's not murder each other. Great, that's good, right? Because it makes the game playable. Imagine if everybody woke up and they're dead. There's no life. There's no society. There's no everything.
So then if other people are like, you know what, fuck those rules, I'm gonna start killing because I feel that's right for me.
Well, people do that nowadays.
Yeah, okay, but that doesn't make it right. Just because it happens, it doesn't make it right.
I'm not saying it does, but for them, in their point of view, they think it's right from their point of view. Otherwise, they
not exactly. So you're arguing because from their point of view, they're doing the right thing. They're doing the right thing because that's their point of view. You're making again, as Todd said, you're literally making excuses for those people.
No, that's not the point.
Proving our point.
That's not the point.
The subjective morality. Otherwise, this wouldn't be an argument.
Yeah,
that's not the point.
We go to the outliers. Oh, but this happened. Oh, but those people did that. Yeah, absolutely.
Again, we are gonna keep it circular, like forever here if we don't stop, right? but to say a final word, and then Todd, you can go. But I don't think we should go because otherwise
we've been at this for 3+ hours, and this is turning into a whole different kind of discussion. So
exactly, but just to make it very clear, what I'm saying. Okay, again, the idea is that things happen, existence. Okay, boom, we are here. If everybody looks at this shirt, will they see red? No. Some people see different colors.
Some people are colorblind.
Exactly. And some animals see more like light, like frequencies and all that, and so on and so forth. So there are parts of life which are not objective. Can we agree to that first?
Yeah, okay, but just because they don't see it as red doesn't mean your shirt isn't red.
Let me get to it. Do we agree that reality sometimes is not the same for everyone?
Again, we agree that the perception of reality.
Perception, yeah, exactly. Yeah. The perception of reality. Okay, the perception of the reality. Okay, now my point is that your the sum of the perception of everybody's reality is reality. There's no outside of that. There's no reality. That's what I'm saying. That the sum of all of those perceptions is going to be the reality. Now, if most people agree that this is red, okay, great to them. If most people agree that murdering is bad and so on, perfect. It's very good, actually. I also agree. Let's not put each other in so on.
Some things can be proven. Some things can be physically, objectively proven.
So one thing that might help, Matt, and it may be that you've read a great deal about this, but I suspect because of how you're talking about it, that perhaps you have not. One thing that might help to give us a common language to discuss this in the future, if you are ever interested, and some of the terms, including the law of human nature, which was what Stein was alluding to, are explained there, is the first quarter of the book, Mere Christianity. Now, the first quarter is exploring the idea of right and wrong, and what can we know about reality, and the nature of right and wrong aside from or outside of our society and history. What can we kind of know about divine nature and truth and right and wrong? The first quarter really addresses the conversation we're having, helps explain the terminology, right? And helps clarify that. And so even if you don't read the rest of the book, which has to do with what are the Christian claims relating to what we can know, that first quarter I think will help if you ever want to talk about this in the future with I think either of us, help clarify what you mean, what we mean, and what's being discussed, because it'll give us kind of a common language to
Mhm.
use. And I heard Stein using some of the language, so I suspect it will work well for him also. But the thing is, on the whole, what you are basically rejecting is truth outside of kind of collective belief. If I understand correctly, the thing is, there are things that are true, even if you are unaware of them. For example, I don't think you really believe that radiation began existing when it was discovered. I suspect you actually think it probably existed before. And but so the fact that no one believed it existed before didn't mean it didn't exist. It got discovered later. The same idea would be if you have an uninhabited island. It's not like the island suddenly came into being. That was there, whether or not people were there believing it, even though it was uncharted and previously undiscovered. Like, and if you don't think that, I think you will. I don't think you could live. I don't think in
No.
practice you could live in the world.
No, I do agree with that. The point is, every bit of reality is, let's say, it's causing it to be. Every bit of reality is a point of view. Again, every air molecule, everything literally is a point of view. That's what I'm saying. It's just different types of points of view. Just like an animal is going to be different than an insect, and it's going to be different than a human, it's going to be different than many other things. And it could be different if you do believe in gods and angels and so on. It would be different probably from their points of views. And you have, again, different points of views, different types of points of views. And all of those make up the reality. Even if as humans we didn't know of an island, the island existence.
Those are not different realities. Those are different perceptions of reality. They're not different realities.
Exactly. But for the person having the perception is going to be different if we compare. Again, let's use the colorblind example.
Absolutely. Right? But perception does not equal proof. Just because I, see something is there, just because I believe something is what it is, doesn't make it that way. Just because I think a bad idea is a good idea doesn't make it a good idea. It's still a bad idea.
Just because you misremember, say, your bank account balance does not change the balance.
Then I misremembered. I have like a couple mil. Just totally
some
Bitcoins.
Bitcoins.
It's my bad,
Yeah. I think that's a good thing to conclude on. And if you guys want to discuss the, especially that chapter, but in general, that Age of Revelation book, I'd love to talk about that. In particular, the claims relating to symbols. His suggestions, symbols of the triune God throughout all these ancient religions. And then also, if you want to talk more about this, though, I think probably, Matt, you should probably read that beginning of Mere Christianity, because it will give you a quick view. There are much longer books you could read, right? That will also kind of explain the terminology. But if you want something that's like 60 pages or less, that's probably a good spot. Because like it feels like we're talking past each other a little bit, or more than you're talking past.
There's a lack of vocabulary, maybe. There's a lack of vocabulary to explain so we can get to common grounds. But like at the end of the day, that's the thing. At the end of the day, I do agree with a lot of what you're saying from the point of view that what you're saying. I'm just trying to show you that there's more to it. That's my point. There's more to what we probably agree on even. But we can, again, if we keep on that, we're going to be infinitely talking about it.
But if it sounds good, if you guys do have a moment afterwards, I'd like to talk with you briefly when we're done. But maybe we should conclude. We are, as you mentioned, a few hours in.
3 hours.
This is like all before editing, so I think by the time I have done all the sponsorship plugging and shit, and you've done your shit, I think like even with editing, it's like close to 3 hours 15.
So we can probably end it here.
So let's end it on on this, we have several topics that we can do several more more shows on, pre-recorded or live. I am down for either. I have a good backlog, so I can do a few live shows, and it's interesting because we have some people in the chat as well, among which Mormon Rishi, who Matt very much agrees with you. So I'll talk to you later, Mr. Mormon. You know, I'll do things that in my from my perspective are the right things. They may not be the right things for you, but from my
Well.
point of view, they're the right things. So bite the pillow. No, but gentlemen, thank you very much for this very very long, very deep going
Very interesting. Yeah.
conversation. Interesting as well. That's definitely one way to describe what all just happened.
Well, thanks for having us.
Same.
Really appreciate the chance to talk with both of you. And for the viewers who skip to the end, I don't know about you guys, but I sometimes do that with YouTube videos. Where is this going? We spent like half an hour talking about Hebrew translation. We then talked about a couple specific claims that Matt made, and the history and kind of physical evidence or written evidence relating to that. And then we jumped into philosophy and theology a bit.
As you do.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, this is it's been all over the place. But I enjoyed it very much. So I mean, guys, any last words? Like plug some of your stuff.
Todd?
Okay, go ahead first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, not so much. You can find me on X at Metmora19. I pretty much will post about similar and even crazier things if you're interested. I can really let myself go there. And also on my bio, you'll find like my YouTube, my other stuff. I'm pretty sure, yeah, you'll find something interesting there if you like the conversation.
Cool. And I guess once again, my name's Todd. You can find me on Twitter at DM_Blackwall. And I also make and sell RPG games. There are 2 up on our website. We're working on a few more, me and my co-author. So you can check that out at blackwallgames.com. And I guess the other thing I would say is if you watch this whole video, what you have just witnessed is a pagan who believes in absolute right and wrong, in morality aside from his preference in a moment. Mm-hmm. A kaabalah practitioner who believes in, and I'm going to try and summarize this correctly, in objective truth mostly. There is some subjective or subjective truth mostly, and some objective truth, like that we're talking now. Say, which was very interesting. Are we
talking about?
And then a Christian who obviously believes in objective morality, because you'd be familiar with like the 10 Commandments and such, which are from God, right? So, yeah. So that was a very interesting conversation, and is not where I expected us to go at the end. So,
same.
Yeah.
did not see that coming, but glad it happened. It definitely gives us some fuel for the next fire, next fucking 3+ hours.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So,
thanks a lot. It was really nice.
Absolutely, you are most welcome. This has been a lot. I very much enjoyed this live show of the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. For everyone watching, for everyone listening, if you have stuck with us to the end, first of all, props. I mean, holy shit. Do remember to like the video, leave something in the comments, leave like your objective or subjective or personal reality in the comments, because why not? Let's have a discussion in the comments as well, if we're at it. Remember to subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so you do get notified whenever a new episode either drops or when we go live again with other interesting guests, or on the weekends, mostly Saturdays, with Zerlath Eternal. It is now not Zerlath Immortal anymore. He's gone from immortal to eternal, for rune readings and high-minded discussions, for everything else that we do, and everything else Greyhorn Pagans related. Go to the website www.greyhornpagans.com, where you can find our merch, our Patreon, all the groups and tribes that we associate ourselves with, our mission statement, however you want to call it. And last but not least, a big thank you to the sponsors of the channel. First of all, Shop Reclaim Repurpose and their awesome, amazing Nefertafel set, Viking chess, as our ancestors used to play it, of which there is physical proof. So, just putting it out there.
You're buying and getting it, yeah.
Yeah. All handcrafted, handmade. It is amazing, amazing stuff. It is a one-man web shop. He does it all himself. So go show him some love and use code SteinFoxTuffle, that is TAFL, to get 10% off your own set. I can highly recommend it. Shop reclaimrepurpose.etsy.com, code SteinFoxTuffle. And a big thank you, of course, also to Dubby Energy. I wish I had some at the moment. I ordered new. It hasn't come in yet. But boy, I can use a pick-me-up at the moment. Dubby is a clean energy drink with, not giving you any jitters, no caffeine crash, no sugar crash, nothing. But, with amino acids, a healthy amount of caffeine, no fillers or artificial dyes, because, that shit is objectively bad for you. Use code SteinFox10 for 10% off your entire purchase, or simply go to dubby.gg/SteinFox10. This is everything that I need to do as a good podcaster, influencer, content creator, however I feel like describing myself at the moment.
And did you mention following you on Twitter or X?
Yeah, I mean, you can do that too if you like. Follow us, which you can also find on our website www.greyhornpagans.com, of course. But yes, follow us on Twitter or X. I still refuse to call it X, so Twitter. At Greyhorn Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Greyhorn Pagans. Everything can be, of course, found on the website. So if you feel like following us on the social platforms as well, go there, go find it, and follow Matt as well. Follow Todd as well. If you liked what you saw, if you liked what you heard, and if you didn't, I don't care. Still do it.
Yeah, exactly.
There will be gems here and there and a lot of shit talking. So
Exactly.
yeah, thank you all. Have a good night, have a good evening, have a good morning, good afternoon, whatever the time may be for you. I know for Matt and I, it's getting pretty late. So yes, thank you all. Until next time. Bye everyone.
See ya.
All right.
Very nice.
And at least we're off stream. So holy shit, man.
That was very interesting.
Yeah, that's a way to describe it.
Yeah. So I was trying to do a
Nice.
recap though at the end because people do that.
Yeah.
Like if you see a long stream, you'll be like, all right, where's this going? Is this
Yeah,
where
Yeah,
you
no, it was
want
nice. It was a nice idea. No.
But yeah, if you guys are up for it, I would love to talk about that other book because
I'll have a look. Definitely.
it's pretty cool, and one of the introductory argument isn't in the book, it's in the foreword, and it's hilarious.
So what was the other book again?
So the one was the Age of Revelation, Elias.
Yeah,
The
Or-
other was
ordered
called
that one?
Mere Christianity. British dude named C.S. Lewis, same guy who wrote like the Chronicles of Narnia.
Oh, C.S. Lewis. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Can you send it on the X chat as well, please? Just so.
I think the chat's still up. Let's see here.
Yeah.
Oh wait, X. I'm on. Hold on.
Yeah, thanks. Just so I have it saved
I
somewhere.
found the
reply here.